Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Lynette, if you would take the roll.
Regent Christian.
Here.
Regent Pease. Present. Regent Hamilton. Here. Regent Warrenthal.
Here.
Regent Barrett.
Here.
Regent Buchanan.
Present.
Regent McLean.
Here.
Commissioner Stearns.
Here.
Governor Schweitzer is represented by Van Villa. And Superintendent Denise Juneau is not here.
Okay, thank you. Excused on Superintendent Juneau. The first thing we'd like to do is approve the minutes from our August 26th conference call. If I would entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Thank you, Regent McLean. They've been published. Are there any changes to those minutes? Okay, all those in favor of approval of the August 26 minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Just a moment, we'll call for introductions from our campus leaders. I would like to say welcome to Mike Ballard and his group from KUSM, which is a part of Montana Public Broadcasting on the MSU Bozeman campus, and they're here with us today. And I think it'll be a unique opportunity for the board and all the participants to give others a chance to look at what we do every other month, or as Jim Foley says, 4 meetings a year. It's a pleasure to have them here, and I do think that it will help others have a little window into our meetings. For the record, the camera does add at least 10 pounds. I'm really quite trim in person. That's not true. With that, Commissioner Stearns or other campus leaders, if we have introductions to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one introduction for the Office of the Commissioner of Higher Education, and that is we have a new Director of Benefits. She started this summer, but I don't think she's been formally introduced to the university community, and that is Connie Welsh. And I think Connie is, oh, there you are, Connie. Welcome. It's a really big job, and we're really appreciate the great experience you have with the state of Montana all these many years in benefits administration, particularly with the complexities of health care as they now are developing. So welcome, Connie.
Campus leaders, are there any other introductions you need to make at this time or would like to make? President Hickswa.
Lisa Watson is our new Vice President for Administrative Services and Finance. Lisa, please stand.
Welcome. Any others? Okay. Chancellor Gilmore, we appreciate you hosting this meeting at Montana Tech. It's a pleasure to be here.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Regents, welcome to your campus in Butte, a place that those of us at Montana Tech are quite proud. I need to tell you that several meetings ago you approved a lease. Several meetings ago you approved a lease part of the alumni stadium to the Montana Tech Foundation for the purpose of installing a scoreboard and jumbotron. That's now been completed and the property's been returned to Montana Tech. We had last week on this campus, sponsored by Senator Max Baucus, the Montana Economic Development Summit. We had somewhere between 2,000 and 2,600 people on this campus, and it was an outstanding program one that we're very, very pleased to have had a part in. You'll see that there's a great deal of construction going on around campus. That's our effort to do the deferred maintenance that has built up over a few years. We have work going on in mining and geology building and work going on in the old petroleum building, which will soon become the health sciences building for our campus. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce one of our students, Corey Sonneman, and his mentor, our Associate Professor Marisa Padula of the Biological Sciences Department. Marisa was also the Montana Case Professor in 2008.
Thank you, Chancellor Gilmore.
For the record, Marisa Padula of the Biology Department. I want to thank you for coming to Montana Tech's campus. At the request of Commissioner Stearns, I was asked to tell a little bit about what it's meant to have Corey Sonneman in my laboratory. And since this meeting is not slated to last a week, I'm not going to list all of his accomplishments. Instead, what I'm going to do is just try to sum up Corey and my experiences with him. Corey, if you'll notice, is a person of boundless energy. Corey really never stops moving, but Corey really never stops giving to others. He's been an enthusiastic promoter of both science, science education, and Montana Tech. Corey has developed outreach programs for the chemistry department and been the prime undergraduate participating in my outreach programs. Corey is unusual in that Corey always takes the call. When I would ask of a group of students in my lab, if someone would do an outreach, a poster presentation at a meeting, go speak to the legislatures about the importance of undergraduate research at Montana Tech, Corey always said yes. Corey has unusual maturity and poise. I had a laboratory meeting where I was sending a few students off to an international phage conference in Washington, and Corey said, yes, I'm getting my talk together. And for those of you familiar with scientific conferences, undergraduate students, graduate students, and even postdoctoral students typically give poster presentations. So I looked at Corey and I said, you mean your poster presentation? He said, no, I found out I'm giving an oral talk. And he was unplussed by the fact that he was going to be speaking in front of 200 PhD international phage biologists. So needless to say, we had a couple quick practice sessions, and apparently he was the hit speaker in the opening session. So that was pretty great. Finally, I just want to say that as well as he's known on campus for his academic excellence, Corey's really legendary for his giving to the campus community and beyond. He has been a coach for both basketball and little guy football. He has orchestrated 16 campus blood drives during his short time here. But these all pale in comparison to his activities with Little Brothers and Little Sisters of Butte. He has spent hundreds, if not thousands, of hours with his two little brothers, Jordan and Dylan. And I can tell you that Montana Tech's proud to be sponsoring Corey, promoting him as a potential future scholarship winner, and that when he was reviewing his umpteenth version of one of his personal statements with me, his telephone rang, and it was one of his little brothers, asking if he could maybe come watch him play football that evening. And as appropriate, Corey took the call, and he looked over at his papers and said, well, I'll work on these a little more tonight, and can we meet tomorrow? And so I hope you'll join me in congratulating Corey, who was recognized by attorney Steve Bullock as Montana's first Mentor of the Year. So congratulations.
For the record, my name is Corey Sonneman. I was told to say that, so. Thank you very much, Marisa, for that great introduction, and thank you for allowing me to come and speak to you guys about my experience here at Montana Tech. It's certainly been a great one. I guess I want to give a brief history of how I got here and why I like it here and why I've stayed here. I was a three-sport athlete at Billings Skyview High School, and initially came to Montana Tech on a football scholarship. But throughout that process, I also started in the petroleum department, pursuing a degree in petroleum engineering. But I wasn't really finding what I really wanted with those two programs, and so I started really looking toward community service in the community, and also into a chemistry degree so that I could pursue my goal of becoming a medical doctor at some point. And so, like Marisa said, I've done a lot of community service. I've coached youth youth sports teams, and I'm currently coaching the Butte High freshman football team right now, so that's been a lot of fun. I took a football to the eye yesterday, though, so I thought about it twice after I got that. But I've developed, like she said, I've developed and implemented scientific outreach programs geared toward introducing basic concepts of chemistry to younger students and also to adults. We've had the privilege of presenting at the 4-H Butte County Fair, Montana Special Olympics, and Montana Tech Little Digger Days, and United Way's Day of the Child. And I think I've estimated we've probably presented to over 4,000 people throughout that process, which is really awesome and really rewarding. And so, of all the awards I've received, I attribute a lot of that success to a couple different groups, among others. But the two that sit atop my list are probably my family, and then also the professors and mentors here at Montana Tech. Vice Chancellor Doug Abbott told me to give a brief story of one of my experiences, kind of a memorable one, and it's one that Maurice already touched on. It was the international conference that I went to, and if I remember correctly, we were in that meeting, and I told her it was a oral presentation, not a poster presentation. And she said, well, I guess we better come here Friday night and start working on our presentation. And so we practiced our presentation for about 2 hours that night, and I got in the car the next day and traveled to Olympia, Washington, and gave that presentation to over probably 200 PhD/MD people there, members of that biennial phage international biology meeting. So I've had a great experience here at Montana Tech, and a lot of the success that I've had is due to the professors and mentors here. And I guess throughout my experiences, I really haven't reached what Vice Chancellor Doug Abbott calls the point of negative marginal return. I just keep on having fun with everything that I do, and want to keep doing it. So thanks for listening to me, and thank you again for inviting me to come and speak. So
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments, Corey. We get bogged down in the work of this job sometimes, but I think at some point, certainly why I'm here is for the students, and stories like that are very motivating to me as a board member. We appreciate your involvement at Montana Tech. I would take just a moment to share a few thoughts. I was driving over here thinking at the end of this short little 9-year stint on the board, I already know for certain a highlight of what I've done here, and certainly a memory that I will always have, is being a part of the search committee and the hiring and the inauguration of President Cruzado. For those of you that weren't there, it was truly a incredible event, and it was meaningful, and I actually very much appreciate my fellow board members giving me the opportunity as chair to participate in that ceremony and do the oath and hand over 100-and-some-year-old Bible, and it was a nice event, and I've appreciated throughout being a part of it. As board members, a couple years ago we had this conversation, but we get bogged down sometimes with $3 fees and what we're going to do next. But of things we do and marks we will leave on this state is the people we hire in these leadership positions. And I'm extremely proud of the hire that we've been able to accomplish at Montana State, and to be part of that is a very meaningful event in my time on the board anyway. So I thank you, and I thank all that made that happen, including Governor Schweitzer, who was there and shared some comments. It was nice to have him part of it, and it was a great event. So all that made that happen, we thank you. I won't start down the names because I know I can't do that, but thank you. It was a great time. On the other side of my parent career ladder for search consulting career, I've want to just share a few thoughts and sort of where we're at on the University of Montana search. I'm sure by now a few of you have seen the that the Presidential Search Committee has completed its work and has moved forward an outstanding candidate that will now be in the board hands, and something that we'll take up on Thursday. Certainly we'll have more to say about that, but I'm very proud of the fact that we have an outstanding opportunity to hire an internal candidate, and that's something I think the entire system should be proud of. And the committee, the work that it did, I just think is outstanding. You know, it had some interesting turns to navigate. I think the committee knew that. It very thoughtfully laid out a process. It followed that process from beginning to end. And when the process took some unique turns and presented to us really truly some great opportunities, the committee held fast and never once considered that it would alter that course to make it a little more palatable to some that thought it should have a more normal and maybe usual look to it. And so I'm very proud of the work we did. We certainly got a little feedback along the way, and the committee held in there. It did what it knew it should do. It ultimately, I think, has found the absolute best alternative we can for the state of Montana, and I'm very proud of the work it's done. And I just want to publicly mention that and say thank you to the Presidential Search Advisory Committee. It was 20 people that worked some hours. The academic types like to write really long CVs. You can't even call them resumes anymore. A few thousand pages to get through, and a lot of hours of meetings, and the work was rewarding, and I like the direction we're headed, and we'll take that up on Thursday. The other two bullet items that are on our agenda, we've talked about this. The Commissioner and I wanted to make sure that we'd made a few comments about it in a public meeting, but the formation of the Montana Friends for Higher Education has been done. The paperwork is done. The bylaws have been signed and filed. We did have an election that put myself, Larry Simpkins with Washington Corp., and Don Lane with Anderson Zermulin as board members. That will likely be expanded. We hope to pull together a meeting at the November board meeting in Missoula that we can work toward developing where that committee is headed. But as you all may recall, it's taken the leftover funds from the 6 mil levy and put those into a not-for-profit organization that we can continue to spread the message of higher education. We will continue to fundraise for a greater audience, including what could be another 6 mil campaign in 10 years. Had a lot of feedback in the campaign that an ongoing commitment would be easier for a lot of companies than a once every 10-year commitment, and so this will be the vehicle to do that. The board members can be expanded to take in a lot broader group. We just wanted to get it established. The money's been transferred from 6 mil account into this company, and we'll meet in November to see if we can't move that forward. The last bullet item on there is in regard to conflict of interest. It's not to say there are any, it's to remind everyone that it's our responsibility as any employee of any form of the university system. If they have a conflict, needs to report that. Board members need to report it. If you're not sure, ask Kathy Swift. She can help work through it. The language is in our policy. Most of the time it refers to a theme of if there's any financial benefit, but if you have a potential conflict or you even have a question about it, I would get with Kathy Swift or your local campuses and deal with that. And along those lines, I'd very much like to thank the campuses for annually submitting their conflict statements to the board. I think those reports can be sort of a tedious part of the business end, but it's very necessary to move us toward being the highest and most ethical organization we can, and instilling public confidence and taxpayer confidence that we are acting appropriately on their behalf and with taxpayer dollars. So just a reminder, it's an important part of our organization, and if there are any, let us know. With that, those are my comments. I would move right into the system issue reports, and first up is the Commissioner's report. Commissioner Stearns.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the board and campus leaders. The first thing I would like to mention is sort of the themes that the Board of Regents, I'm calling them cornerstones because there are 4 of them. We'll have them up on the screen here for you for a moment. We welcome your advice on these, but these have come over the last year of conversation with the board and with our many partners who advocate for us in the legislative and session. And let me just run down them quickly, and then we can go on to the next part. The student success agenda, particularly a big part of that is a piece we're calling College Now, which is Montana's signature effort among many across the country. This one was one of only 3 to receive a nearly $2 million grant to forward, and it is to call attention to many Montanans that we really have a community college near you. It might be called a College of Technology, it might be a program within one of our other universities, but we have the missions of technical training, transfer degrees, and transitional, developmental, dual enrollment programs connected to our 2-year colleges. So that is a piece of it, but there are many other pieces, and we'll talk about some of them in a little bit when Regent Buchanan tells us a little bit more about the discussion of and the conclusions and recommendations of the board's reinvention task force. The second one, working together with our partners in K-12, that was always envisioned by the writers of the Montana Constitution in 1972. They formed a unified Board of Education. It has been a work in progress, lo these many years, since 1972, but I think it is getting stronger than ever. The theme that some of the local school districts, members of the board, are adopting, and I think increasingly perhaps most of the school districts, and certainly Superintendent Denise Juneau, my valued and trusted colleague with whom I converse regularly for advice, counsel, and common cause, it has said, you know, Missoula originated it, but we're going to pick it up as a statewide campaign that graduation matters. We will hear more as we go along about the Digital Academy and its remarkable start this fall in terms of over 60 teachers involved, over 1,000 enrollments. This may come up a little later. If it doesn't, someone remind me, because that is a terrific story to tell. We're very much a part of it. They're based on the University of Montana campus with a lot of in-kind support from the University of Montana. It's really off to a great start, and it's just one example of our seamless educational efforts. And I think our legislators, whenever I visit with them, value that, appreciate knowing more about it, and same with the citizens across the state. Our third cornerstone is that we, building upon our recruitment and retention task force of 2 years ago and updating that, signifying and participating with our partners in all of the collective bargaining agreements and those who are not in collective bargaining units. We value, the Board of Regents signifies this to me all the time, we know where the rubber hits the road, and that is with our employees, our faculty, staff, and what they do to make the wheels turn in the university system. One of our major partners, of course, is MEA MFT. Their theme, their tagline this past year, and we've worked with them and enjoyed helping promote that, is that their members are certainly doing work that matters. Excuse me. And finally, the cornerstone theme of the MUS Montana University System research translates to economic development almost as surely as night follows day. And a lot of that was in evidence in conversations in the summit this last week. The fact that the research that our faculty are doing, the ways that they are incorporating students in a lot of that undergraduate research and graduate. Increasingly, over my 25, 30-year career in higher education, I no longer get the research with the tone that maybe it's impractical or that it is something that should be on the side. Increasingly, our business advisors across the state, our advisory groups, whether it's from agriculture to the most sophisticated levels of technology, are saying, tell us more, give us more, do more. We appreciate your faculty. We know that those have spin-off industries. It does equate to economic development. So those members of the board are what I see as our 4 themes, and almost everything we do or we will talk about with our subcommittee in appropriations in January and on through the session will relate to one of those 4 areas. And so I put it before you now, not for current discussion because we've had some chance to talk about it, but to make sure that everyone watching on KUSM or here present will make sure that they get response to us in terms of fleshing out the cornerstones of your platform to convey, along with our other educational partners, to the Montana legislature. So unless there are questions, should I move along to a couple other pieces? To help convey this and to help convey the priorities of College Now and to convey your agenda, members of the board, throughout the state. We do have the listening sessions scheduled that we have talked about. I won't have them up here, but let me just mention next week schedule so you can get a flavor. If you are wondering if it's Tuesday, it must be Belgium. Let me just tell you next week that if it's Tuesday, I think it's Poplar. Or if it's Monday, it's Glendive. The listening sessions start on Monday. They actually started yesterday afternoon here in Butte, and we appreciated that one very much. But on Monday morning, there will be a listening session with Regent Pease and myself representing you, and we will touch on those 4 cornerstones, and particularly College Now and strengthening and respecting and elevating two-year education in the state. But that's in Sydney on September 28th. In the afternoon, it's in Glendive. In September 29th, someone help me, is that Tuesday? I said it was Tuesday. The 29th is a Wednesday, good, thank you. On Wednesday, we will be in Poplar. Again, Regent Pease will be there and I will be there to listen to the citizens and who are in that area who would like to share with us their concerns and their interest in post-secondary education, and how important it is to their families and how we can help. Same day, on Wednesday, we go to Glasgow. Did you know this, Regent Pease? We're on the road a lot next week. Yeah, you know that road pretty well. I know you do. And finally, on Thursday, we will be in Havre on September 30th for a legislative forum, a little bit longer venue, and I would like to thank Chancellor Trokey and his staff for setting that up and inviting us to participate. So we'll build that in, and obviously Regent Hamilton. I think Deputy Commissioner Mary Moe will be able to be with us at that one as well. And so that's just the first of several busy weeks in regarding the listening session and communicating our messages, but also listening to hear the messages of our fellow citizens about their needs and their hopes and dreams for post-secondary education in Montana. Mr. Chairman, I can answer questions or move along.
Are there any questions for Commissioner Stearns this time? Okay, we can just move along.
We'll move along to access to success, and I would like to share with some folks who may be watching for the first time on streaming video or on KUSM that Access to Success is one of the initiatives established nationally by some groups, and they launched it at the National Press Club October of 2007. So we have been part of this. We're part of 24 systems of the nation's 56 university systems who participate in this. And one of the reasons we decided to join in and was not because it was going to give us grant money, but because of its goal, the very admirable goal to, over the next decade or so, to really reduce, perhaps even cut in half, the gaps in terms of graduation and achievement in college between low-income and minority students and other students that have access to higher education. That is a huge issue. It's a big issue in our state. The fact that if you are low income or you're a member of an underrepresented minority, your chances of even going to college or finishing or doing so without a lot larger debt load are much smaller. That is what I call a national scandal. And if a group was going to be addressing it, I knew from things we have all talked about in terms of your strategic goals, increasing need-based aid and so forth, that it was your goal too. One of the things that it really has done for us is to pay for professional development that we may not have gotten any other way. That includes people like Joe Fedock and John Seck and Renee Dubé, I think just got back from a conference to work on access to success issues. I know the way some of our folks first met President Cruzado was attending an Access to Success Native American student success workshop. Others who've attended these include Jed Liston from the UM campus, Stacy Klippenstein from the MSU Billings campus, Kathy Hughes on strategic enrollment. So it conveys, I think, a little bit, and I haven't mentioned all the names, the way an initiative such as this can help us pull together as a system, and some of you know how hard that is to do, on a common and very critical agenda, not just to Montana, but a national agenda. So with that, I'll have Tyler Trevor, Associate Commissioner for Planning and Analysis, make his way. But while he's doing so, I would like to say, in some ways, Tyler was the most resistant to taking on another initiative. Sometimes you'll hear the phrase initiative fatigue. And he's our institutional researcher, and so I swallowed hard, but I eventually jumped in anyway and pulled him over the cliff with me. Because what this really is insisting is that across the country, we develop common metrics. And he said, oh my gosh. And his first, what would you say, Renee and others, the first 6 months or year was where we were dragging him kicking and screaming. But I'll let him take it from there. Associate Commissioner Tyler Trevor.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, good morning. I guess I have only to go up from here with that description. So, and it is a truth that I was a bit reluctant to jump into another initiative, one that is quite data intensive and have our measures dictated by an outside agency at a national level. But after having my arm twisted by the commissioner, I gladly adopted these measures. And in fact, in doing so, as I've described to Commissioner Stearns, I'm the #1 flag swinger now. I think this initiative, in terms of aligning our measures that can be compared nationally, kind of forcing us to measure and compile pretty complex data sets at the system level is hugely beneficial. And I wouldn't be surprised if this initiative doesn't catch more fire, and that in the years to come, if I'm lucky enough, I'll be able to present to you in more detail some of the data that I'm about ready to just give you a high-level overview of. The benefits, beyond just consistent definitions and measures nationally, is that we're taking a system look at student success. A lot of times in our measures of the strategic plan, we'll aggregate institutional measures, and we'll tell you that the state's graduation rate at four-year colleges is 41%. But that's nothing more than basically adding together the students that started at one institution and finished at one institution. And it's only looking at full-time students. With this initiative and these measures, that's no more. We start at the beginning with a cohort, full-time and part-time students, and we track them to all institutions in the university system. So inside of that, we're getting retention, transferability, and graduation rates by low income status as well as underrepresented minorities. It's very powerful information. All of the data you'll see today I have at the institutional level as well. We have just really a wealth of information here. This is, to me, just kind of encapsulates what you should expect out of system institutional research. So at a very high level here, this is for all four-year institutions in the MUS. We're just taking a look at the percent of students that enter our institutions by year that are either Pell students. We're going to use Pell Grants as a proxy measure for low income, and the percent of students that are underrepresented minorities. And so the light blue line you can see from fall 2002 through fall 2008, that's what we have right now. Fall 2009, we're always a year behind with financial aid data, that we've actually gone down in the percentage of students that have received Pell. This kind of freaked me out when I first saw it. I looked at Idaho, Wyoming, and North Dakota. They have similar trends as well. And I spoke with our financial aid folks in GSL, and you know, there's some federal regulations that might have driven this. I don't have a great explanation for it. It's definitely something that we need to be aware of. I think we can expect this to go up with the recent changes, so we'll keep track of that. We've seen slight increases in the percentage of students that are coming that are underrepresented minorities to our four-year campuses. So on the next slide, we have this by two-year. And you can see that Pell students have actually increased at our two-year campuses. Remember, our enrollment has increased quite a bit over this time at our two-year campuses. There's kind of a funky timeline here. It's from fall 2001 through fall 2009. The years 2002 and 2003 aren't in there. The great part of being in a national initiative like this, I just blame that on them. They didn't want those 2 years, so I don't have it in here. We certainly have the data, though. Going to the next slide. We now get into retention rates by Pell students at four-year campuses. So non-Pell versus Pell. So low-income students here are not faring as well in the percent of students returning. Now, just taking a second here to analyze these retention rates. These are for all students, not just first-time, full-time students. That's what you've seen every other retention rate I've ever stood up here and talked to you about. This is all students, but it's all MUS institutions. So 72% of our students that were non-Pell in fall 2002 returned for a second year. That's increased now up to 76% in 2008 for non-Pell students. And you can see the applicable trend line for Pell students doesn't match up. And on another note, when you have the total retention rates here, and we use this in our strategic plan, it's basically our second measure in our strategic plan. The way we've been doing it, it looks like it's been completely flat. We've had no progress because all we've been able to do in the past is take IPEDS data, which measures it individually for each institution and treats dropouts and treats transfers as dropouts and adds them together. We've been at 71, 71, 71, 71, and not going anywhere. So this paints a much more accurate picture of retention efforts in the system. Going to the next slide. This is the same thing for two-year campuses. It's much closer in terms of the effect of being a Pell student or not on retention rates. One more summer. And then we look at retention rates by race, ethnicity, and here we use that acronym URM, underrepresented minority, and there's a huge difference. And then looking at it at the two-year campuses, again, a giant difference in retention rates. 57% for whites. We have underrepresented minorities at 45%. And remember, naturally, two-year campuses will have lower retention rates just given their student body. And this is taking everybody, full and part-time students. Okay, then we move on to transfer rates. When I was doing this, I couldn't help but think of, man, I could have had that data a couple of years ago, but we didn't. This was basically a summer effort to get this put together, and taking those cohorts of students. If you look at underneath fall 2002, we had 5,424 students. Over a 6-year period of time, 780 of them transferred to another institution within the MUS. That's about 15%. That's an important group of students. Common Core numbering is absolutely important, but I will say that's a smaller percent than I would have bet on. So looking at that for a 6-year period, so we have 2002, 2003, and 2004. Those are 6-year time periods that people had to transfer. And you can see that it's about 14 to 15% of our students will transfer. And then as time goes on, of course, the timeline shortens, and you can see that all the way down to 2008, after a 2-year period of time, only 6% of the students have transferred. And transferability here is just defined as, did you show up as an enrollment record at another institution during that time period? And now we move on to 2-year, and this is where it's absolutely critical. Throughout the initiative, this is one of the cool things. It measures transferability, counts it as a success, and looks at it, did you transfer to another 2-year institution? And then separates it into, did you transfer to a 4-year institution? So if you just look at the blue lines going across there, you can see the percentage of our students that transfer. And we know that we don't have a lot of students that are transferring from 2 to 4, but this is definitely going to help us measure progress. There's not a lot of mobility from 2 to 2. That's pretty much to be expected. And you can see in 2006, our transfer rates here are the highest at 14%. And this is over a 4-year period, so we're going to have to let this sort of play out. But I would be willing to bet that we're going to see that 14% continually increase. A couple more slides here. They kind of culminate in graduation rates. These are giving students 6 years to graduate that enter a 4-year institution. They're full and part-time students when they enter now. So these rates are a little bit different. They also cover all transferability is included in here. And you compare Pell students to non-Pell students, and it's just a dramatic difference in the graduation rates, from the difference of 31% to 46%. And then you take a look at underrepresented minorities and compare the difference. 26% to 43%. Huge differences. Moving on to the 2-year, we see the exact same type of trend. Lower rates overall. We actually bumped it up in the initiative to 4 years, giving them to graduate because we have part-time students in there, and just the same type of trends. Low-income students and underrepresented minorities not succeeding at near the rate as the rest of the population. Mr. Chair, that sums up the presentation. I'd take any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Questions for Deputy Commissioner? Regent Hamilton.
Deputy Commissioner Trevor, how are stop-outs counted in the initiative? Are they coded so that when they do come back after 2 or 3 years that they show up as a new student or as a transfer student or a re-enrollment, or how do they work?
Mr. Chair, Regent Hamilton, they are picked up in the graduation rate. If you stopped out and you came back and you graduate, you're going to show up. But we don't have a specific code for stop outs because the mere fact that you can stop out at any time, the number of options to track down all those students is almost impossible. If you stopped out and you just happened to stop out in the second fall semester after you entered, that would show up in here as a detriment to our retention rates. So again, they're not perfect measures. They don't cover everything, and we kind of have to use them in a compilation to get the full picture.
Regent Pease.
Thank you. Deputy Commissioner, I'm curious to know, as you looked at the data, did you what were the major surprises? I mean, from your professional specialization, what would you observe?
Mr. Chair, Regent Peace, well, right off the bat, it was the drop in the percent of students receiving Pell. Our overall, the percent of students that receive any type of financial aid, and that includes loans, is pretty steady, if not increasing. But I don't know if we have a great explanation for why at four-year campuses we've gone from about 31% of the student population receiving Pell Grant down to 25. So that one right off was surprising. But on the flip side of what surprised me was how high our retention rates are. If you look at the overall, when you combine Pell and non-Pell students, we have a system-wide retention rate that's near 75%. So at four-year campuses, so 75% of our students are coming back to an MUS institution. That's not counting those students that might have gone to Carroll or any other private school or a tribal college. And for that matter, we don't have the community colleges in this yet either. Conventional wisdom would say if you took full and part-time students and calculated their retention rates at four-year campuses, well, that should be about 65%. But not the case when you add in the whole system. So I think those 2 points were the ones that struck me most.
Associate Commissioner, do you have any idea offhand what the four-year rates would look like at a four-year institution? I mean, how much does that change it?
Mr. Chair, it does change it quite a bit. It's closer to for graduation rates, I assume you're saying. It's closer to 20%. And we need to look at that, and then we have the data. It's right here in this data set. I just didn't pull it out for the presentation. We'd have to look at that for the entire system for students moving in between campuses. But it is much lower, between 17 and 20% of our students.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I think I would be remiss in not recognizing a colleague of mine, Charlie Reed, who's head of the California State College System, which is huge, has 450,000 students. But because California has become a minority-majority state, he took the lead and recruited many of us from these 25 states, 26 states that are participating to say, if we don't, first of all, get the good information and then see what a challenge we have for poor folk, poor, low income and underrepresented minorities, we've got a problem in each of our states in terms of having a bright educational future. So and a prosperous future, that connection to economic development. So that's what this is all about. It's not just that old-fashioned phrase, social justice. It is about all of our states, and including Montana's future economic prosperity. And I think it's laying a good groundwork. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Regent Peace.
Madam Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, I think that having this data is just, it's so instructive because we've had, I think, certainly we've had a look at some of this data in a couple of cases at individual campuses, but to grasp it for the entire system is so critical. Also to understand our status as a state and the income of our families being in the lower percentile, it means to me that our families are not participating in a program that is available to them for some reason. Well, we won't know until we look into that, but it seems that it's a program nationally that is expanding. The participation rate should be expanding in Montana, and it simply isn't. We're obviously not taking up the opportunity to have our citizens make that application and get the benefit of a program that could really move our state. It also means to me that if you're a minority and low income, you probably bear a double trouble. This data would say that. So I think that we certainly, it also means that we have more looking into the data to do. Once you have this set, you need to know more.
Thank you. I believe we are on to our Regent Work Group recommendations. Regent Buchanan, present.
Thanks, Chairman Christian. First of all, a quick thank you to Sheila and staff and all of those that have put so much time into this discussion over the last year. I think what I'm finding, as everybody else is we're not concluding anything. We're kicking off one heck of an aggressive agenda here. So a couple of things. Tyler, Deputy Commissioner Trevor, has talked about initiative fatigue. He has put so much time and effort into this, and one-on-one interaction with faculty, with classified staff, members of the work group, both citizens and regents, and come up with one heck of a kind of a comprehensive task list to augment our strategic plan and help us kind of make some movements forward. And I'd ask Deputy Commissioner Trevor to come up, talk a little bit about the first document on the agenda, the guiding principles, and share with us some of the role that will play.
Mr. Chair, Regent Buchanan, thank you. This has been a great year this past year. Taking a look at the efficiency and effectiveness and strategies that might improve the university system through Regent Buchanan's work group on reform and reformation. These two documents, the first one I'll talk about is the guiding principles for our strategic plan. The work group pretty much unanimously agreed that this is something that we need to add to our strategic plan. We need to be more explicit in how we develop our plan, how we review our plan, how we assess our plan, to ensure not only that we're including all of the stakeholders that need to be included, but just the public in general can understand where we're headed and how we update that plan. So if you take a look, it's up on the screen. It's a one-pager that would be added to the strategic plan, probably right after the introduction in our plan, that just generally describes what we would expect out of our plan, that it would be systematic in nature, that we would review our plan on a determined cycle, that we would be accountable, that we'd have measures and outcomes that would drive our plan, that will be inclusive and ensure that the stakeholders and constituents of the state are included and at the table when we're reviewing and updating our plan, and that this plan would be flexible. And it's the type of document that is dynamic and can change with the times, and that it is certainly connected to our campuses, and that we'd expect our campuses to drive their plans from the overall Board of Regents strategic plan. The plan would have a statewide focus in advancing major higher educational issues for the state, and all the while keeping in context the national scene and some of these initiatives such as Access to Success that we just discussed. So you can see down towards the bottom, we have a very general biennial planning timetable that would start next July, that would convene a system statewide meeting to take a look at our plan, review our measures, and assess where updates need to occur. We then move to the equivalent board meeting as this one, except next year, where those operating budgets, which are tied to our plan, are approved, and then working throughout the year to implement those strategies and work on the initiatives that further our goals. We would reassess and re-gauge and remeasure after 1 year, not quite at the same level that we did in 2011, but direct that reassessment towards a communication and advocacy program that leads into the legislative session that's driven by our strategic plan. So on a 2-year cycle, that's what we would do, and it would start all over again following each legislative session.
Thank you. I'm curious, just, I mean, I know we're always pushing for more, but it seems as though the last two items, I guess I'm wondering if we don't need to move those up a bit, just in conjunction with budgeting process and listening tours and, well, both of them, but in particular the second one. It seems like most of our communication plan and that needs to be done before we hit listening sessions, which we've tended to do every couple of years.
Mr. Chair, I think that this table is an oversimplification of the process, that from every one of these guideposts, you would be continually improving and readjusting a communication plan that we have in place. And I know that's a major concern and initiative within the Commissioner's office to get a hold and corral communications. I would view this timetable as much more in a generic sense.
Just a quick follow-up, Mr. Chairman, I think you're right. I mean, I don't think we've ordered those in any sort of priority level. I see it as kind of in line with our biennial process. And as Deputy Commissioner Trevor outlined, a lot of these things are already incorporated into the processes that we're using. It's a matter of making it extremely explicit. So all of the stakeholders, faculty, classified staff, students, taxpayers, are aware of when and where they can plug into this process. Again, by no means suggesting that we're not incorporating a lot of these basic principles, and they're not already doing a good job of them. I think we are. It's just a matter of putting a really detailed map out in front of the community to say, hey, plug in where you'd like to.
The summer concerns me, that it's just such a void, that like the July 2012 meeting. We probably need those updates to coincide with a meeting, whether it's the March meeting, if that's too soon, or if it's the May meeting. It gives you all direction to go through the summer, which is when we have some time to work on those. That would be my completely uninformed 2 cents in the matter.
I think the point's well taken. It says annual update. The way that we operate already through the structured meetings that we have on our calendar lends itself to be giving updates to many of the dynamic and broad initiatives and agenda items that are trying to be a bit articulated in the success agenda, but more importantly to the strategic plan. So I think that my suggestion, or my reiteration of support behind this, is that for those that don't come to the meetings every time, for those that have an interest outside of the long agendas that we put in front of the folks that do have a stake in each of these meetings, they know that there's an opportunity to plug in and find updated information that's relevant to any sort of trend or initiative that's being championed by us. Any other questions about the guiding principles or anything on that document? Great. Again, Deputy Commissioner Trevor has had such a huge role in constructing this, and it is dynamic, it's changing. So as we start to implement, at least follow some of these plans that we're putting into place, all input is certainly welcome. Moving on to the second item, the success agenda. Again, as previously articulated, we have a pretty dynamic and broad strategic plan in place. And one of the goals of this conversation was to walk out with some specific action steps that we can take to advance that strategic plan. So these are a few of them that have surfaced during this process. Obviously, a couple of these initiatives within this student success agenda are efforts that have long roots and have been well in the making prior to the creation of this work group. So what I've been most appreciative for with Sheila's staff and everybody that's engaged is we're looking for ways to say, hey, we are trying to reinvent, we are recognizing national trends, and using this conversation as a platform to float it in front of the citizen members of our work group, the regents that participated. So a lot of this is not new. However, I do think that there are some strong opportunities in front of us with this to really take that step forward as it comes to demonstrating to the state, one, how prudent we're being with the limited resources that we have, and two, our recognition that we are competing in a national and international education environment, and we need to do things to make sure that we're rising to the top to attract those students. So I'll go through these pretty briefly. I know a couple of regents have comments related to individual items. I think that some of the consternation that has been expressed related to a couple of these items relates to the devil in the details. The devil is yet to be articulated in many cases. We'll talk about performance-based funding, but obviously there's been a lot of concern expressed about that. This is, as I suggested earlier, the beginning of a lot of work, in my opinion. This is not a report or a game plan that's by any means complete. This is things that we're saying we need to continue to focus on, and the construction of how these things get laid out is going to follow our guiding principles document, which is all stakeholders are invited and encouraged to participate. So the first one, institutional role differentiation. There's a couple of ways that I think about this. The first is from a governing board's perspective. We have initiatives and priorities that we have to accomplish as a state. we have to accomplish as a university system. And our ability from a governing board to identify which of our campuses or which group of our campuses focuses on particular activities, I think is very important for us, in particular as it relates to assessment. We can't send out requests for work to be done broadly and expect acute answers coming back as far as how successful they've been. So to distribute among the different roles that we believe these institutions, we as the system, not just the regents, the different campuses, what role they play, I think is a very strong governing tool. What sticks out to me more importantly, and you've heard me articulate this in the past, we are competing for students. This is a very competitive environment. We as a system are doing a great job. Enrollment's growing. But when I first joined the board 3 years ago, the message perennially, it was so strong. Our graduation rates, the number of students graduating from the high schools in the state of Montana can only be expected to continue to decline. Well, if we're going to continue to compete regionally and nationally for students, you think about the campuses and the institutions around the country that are the strongest at recruitment, and it strikes me that they're very clear with what they're great at. What are their centers of excellence? MIT Engineering School, you go to Wharton at Pennsylvania for a finance school. Very clear focus, what they are the strongest at. And inside of there's some terms, but I think one of them that sticks out the most to me is that target resource allocation. I think we need to be in the business of investing more money into the things that we're the strongest at and releasing investments in the areas that perhaps don't support the strategic plan or the core identification of any of our campuses. So again, how we go about that is yet to be determined. The mission review documents that are being put together by the campuses are extremely helpful in differentiating from our perspective who's doing what and who's doing what well. And I think it's incumbent upon this board as we go forth and make further decisions, not only budgetary, but programmatic. Are we supporting each of these institutions, each of these campuses' strengths when we're approving and not approving programs? Admission standards, this is about student success. We know that students have different levels of preparation, and their success is determined on our ability to say, here's the environment where you're going to have the most success. And this, again, is being created. It has been something we've certainly incorporated into what we've done in the past. I think it strengthens it and elevates it as a priority for us for further discussion. And I look forward to seeing how that continues to unfold. Transferability, clearly making monumental work in that arena. The numbers I saw yesterday, Commissioner Stearns, were impressive. It was 600 and some core. It was a huge number of Common Core numberings. And as I think about what the state expects, as I hear from students and parents about what the state expects, there's a lot more work left here, but it is very encouraging for us to have the ability to say we're making progress. And the thing that I think this does is links. There's 11 items on this, 9 items on this student success agenda. This is one of those efforts that has brought us to this point where we can now start to talk about shared curriculum and those types of things that I think are going to, again, elevate that access and retention element of what we're trying to accomplish. Community college programs, College Now, Commissioner Stearns talked about it briefly, and we're going to talk about it in greater detail down the road. I think that the fact that we're getting national recognition and that the system under Deputy Commissioner Moe's leadership and the campus CEO's leadership are recognizing and adopting that this is a priority. I'm excited to see how this unfolds, and whether it's rebranding of how we do things, if it's tweaking the management process enough to allow for the local impact and input associated with our workforce development efforts. I feel like I think we all agree that this is a pretty exciting initiative that we're a leader in nationwide, and that's an encouraging reality for me. This need-based financial aid conversation, I know the governor's office has a lot of opinions about it. We've done some exploration into how we more effectively distribute the resources that we do have, and most importantly, how do we grow that pool of resources so that access continues to be a priority. This is a conversation that we're on the front end of, but we know that we need to get better at it. Not that we're not succeeding in helping students get into the classroom, but with the change of the environment, with lending and access elements that we're seeing under the current administration out of Washington, this is a very contemporary discussion and one that we need to continue to dive into. Program and service alignment. I think this one scares folks to some extent. From my perspective, in an environment where I think the only safe assumption we can make is that resources are going to be limited moving forward in the near term. This speaks a little bit to what I was arguing about differentiation. We cannot expect, based on the checkbook that we've got, the ability to do everything on every campus. And if we're going to take on new initiatives, if we're going to increase investments in areas that we are finding success and our students are finding success, we're going to have to find resources from within. There's terms associated with this process. We've been through some webinars. Lynn and I sat in on one and have done some follow-up conversations about this program prioritization. These are all elements of this, and it's not limited to academic programs. It needs to be expanded to everything we're doing, and as Commissioner Stearns is very humbly admitted, I mean, we even at the OCHI level and at the Regents level, we have to recognize that we're asking a huge, we put a huge plate of activities and expectations in front of these campuses, and we have to recognize that every decision we make needs to be challenged and reanalyzed and possibly taken off of the table as far as priorities go. I know that Regent Barrett has expressed a kind of vote of confidence behind this because the pool of resources is not going to grow huge this year from a general fund and tuition perspective. So we've got to find a way to make those resources internally a little bit more nimble. And it's a process that does not start top down. It's a bottom-up process. And as we articulate how we want to get this done, we recognize that. And faculty, classified staff, and of course campus CEOs, this is not a regent decision. This is a campus decision and a system decision that way. So I'm glad it's on the block and it's being discussed, and how we go about getting it integrated into our action plan and our activity plan is, again, to be decided. And we will not move forward without participation from all the stakeholders that are involved, and that's everybody in this conversation. The data and information, Deputy Commissioner Trevor is, as you know, a great demonstration of how effective good data can move decisions. And his thrust to continue to integrate what we're using, both from a hardware perspective, trying to get consistent and standard technology platforms on all of our campuses so we can share the data so our students can transfer between students is one element. But we're making a lot of decisions in an era where assessment is possible. And if we continue to focus and make the investments in our data warehouses and in the way that we manage the data, it's only going to make us more, our ability to make decisions to perpetuate or to terminate efforts more successful. And this process is a huge one. Over a long course of time, it's going to take both fiscal resources, but a focus from this governing board to make it a priority. And I think from my experience on the board, we're doing that and finding great results. We're able to go through demonstrations like we just saw, saying, here's how you're doing. And that's the only way that we can move, as we know what we've done so far. Communication and advocacy. We are blessed in this system with an incredibly strong communicator in OCHI with Dr. Stearns, and it's interesting to me that she's the first one to recognize and to say we've got new things and better things that we can do as a system. And as many items within this document, a lot of those ideas have already been implemented. There's a calendar of listening sessions. We've increased our public interaction at each of the visits that we make to these campuses, which I think is extremely prudent. And the participants in the planning process and in the governing process are continuing to be expanded and cemented as far as faculty and staff involvement. And the internal communication and external communication is what I think this speaks to. And as we all know, heading into a legislative session, everyone's putting together communication plans and those types of things. One of the things that we really believe, I really believe, that needs to continue to be a priority for us is that we articulate the value of the product, the outcome to the state. And I think that potential for goodwill development is incumbent upon our ability to do that. As we were discussing last night, the conversation in the press and in the streets often is limited to the governing. We don't talk about what we're trying to accomplish as far as a product enough, and we need to make sure that we own that conversation and that we take the leadership role in elevating the product, the outcomes that we're trying to accomplish as a system. And again, under the leadership of Dr. Stearns and the CEOs, who I am always marveling at their ability to communicate and be cheerleaders for what is happening internally, I don't think this is a major shift in activity. It's a focus that I think is quite possible. So just covered quite a bit. As I would summarize this last year, of discussions. I cannot thank Ochi and the other regents enough for the commitment. We got together physically about 10 times, on the phone often, and certainly tried to engage all of the other stakeholders at different levels to incorporate a lot of ideas. And at the end of the day, we're not telling you that we're done. I think what we're telling you is we've got a plate full of activities that are going to continue to help us advance the mission of higher education in the state. So be prepared to jump in here and help us make these, elevate these as action items to help us augment the strategic plan as it's written. With that, certainly would encourage any comments or questions from folks. Angela.
If I could, let's do this. First, just want to say, Regent Buchanan, thank you. You know, I commented earlier, sometimes we get so bogged down in the business, I question whether we're participating in governance or ratifying what's been done. And I think from the get-go, you've been the initiator behind this and the driver behind it. And no matter where it takes us, it's opening conversations on the front end, and we're talking about things that I really think is appropriate for this board to be talking about. And it's been a project, and I appreciate all of your efforts in moving it to where it's been. What I would like to do is, it is an item for us. I'd just like to make the motion that we approve the item as posted, and then we can have some discussion about it. So I will make that motion. And are there any discussion? And Regent McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I too would like to express my appreciation to Regent Buchanan and the members of the Regents who were a part of the task force, and to the task force as a whole for doing the great work. One of the things that stands out at me, though, as I look at it, and I would simply offer this, that no success agenda would be complete, I think, without the high-quality faculty and staff across our system. So I would offer, perhaps in the institutional role differentiation section, that we add a tab to recruit and retain high-quality faculty and staff. Thank you.
Other Regent Barrett.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank Todd for the work on this, and I don't know if it was labor of love, but it was a labor, that's for sure. I want to make a couple comments because we've had, or at least I certainly have talked a lot about programmatic review and duplication, and I've been reflecting on it. Particularly, we had a conversation last evening with the campus leaders, and I think that certainly we as a board, but I personally, we have to be careful about the messages that we're conveying. That sometimes there's a sense, and maybe by some of the examples I used, to give the idea that we need to focus, very carefully and precisely on every little minutia of duplication. And I don't think that's the case. And President Dennison made the comment last night, and I thought about it. I know that's a surprise, but I do that sometimes. But some of the things that are duplicative are what, in fact, make a university a university. It takes a certain amount of mass and substance of all different kinds to make one. At the same time, having said that, I think we are not only facing a legislative session of constraints. I think we are facing an era of constraints. Whether that era is 5 years or 15 years or something in between, there's a people, I don't know if they're a lot smarter than us, but they have a lot bigger titles than us that are wrestling with it, and they don't know the answer, so I don't think we're going to know the answer. So the best source we have for money to apply to where we need it is the money that's currently being allocated to us. That's where we're going to have to find the money. And we already have a process, and it's ongoing on all the campuses, and it's reflected in these recent campus reviews we have. We have a process of programmatic review. The campuses look at programs and consider them. But to me, programmatic review and programmatic prioritization are two distinctly different things. And I think we will find the resource we need by both asking the duplication question, but I don't want to emphasize that as much. I think maybe I've pushed that too hard, made it sound like there can't be any cross-pollination, if you will. But we're going to have to look at the prioritization of what is really important to each campus. And the analogy I used, which I mentioned last night, is in this trying time, if you told a business, you're going to be able to keep 90% of what you have, so pick your best 90%. I think that's where we are. And the kind of cuts that we see often in government, by the nature of government, and I want to separate us from government because I don't think it's the same, where cuts have to be sort of across the board and they have to be sort of equalized. It's sort of the nature of the political process. I don't think those kind of cuts serve a university system well. I think we have to be very strategic about the type of changes we make. And they're not cuts. We're going to have the same amount of money. We're going to have to maybe change where we use it. And we're going to have, again, the program prioritization we're going to have to do is pick. I used 90% as an example. I do not know what the number is. But pick those things that we do the very best and decide on what things we value on a campus by campus, the very least. And they may have to go, and that will be our best source of money to do all these things. So that's the task we're going to have to take. And frankly, the people who know that best, and will have to tell us, were the people we met with this morning, the faculty. I mean, we can, I can get dangerous and read some education books, but that's no substitute for having been in a classroom and on a campus for 20 years and trying to understand those things. So we have to try to keep engaging them. We did a little this morning, but more to find out where those programmatic changes are going to be to give us the resource to take the things we decide we're going to do and do them better and keep them.
Regent Bornpool.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again, Regent Buchanan, for all the work that you've done on this, and of course the other regents and the community members. I don't think we can be repetitive when we're thanking for such great work, so job well done. I know that a lot of eyebrows were raised when it came to the performance-based funding in this document, and I would like to speak to that just a little bit. When we're looking at ourselves as a system, of course we recruit out of state and internationally, but one of our primary focuses, of course, is educating the students of Montana and setting them up for success. And so I would just like to encourage everyone, and I would also like to be a part of this conversation as it moves forward, to not look inward at the budgets, but to look outward at our vision. As Regent Buchanan said, our perception in the press is not always, us selling ourselves as how great higher education is when it, obviously we all know the benefits. And I think most often money dictates that conversation when people feel uptight about the resources that they have. And in this case, it can often be perceived as a money grab between institutions. I think it makes people really nervous, and that turns the conversation into, this is our money, what can we do with it, rather than saying, this is our vision, these are our resources, how can we help promote that? So I just wanted to say that I look forward to being a part of that conversation and seeing how that progresses and keeping our eye on that vision rather than just the underlying resources.
Thank you. Other Regent Pease.
I would like to review for a moment where this task force came from. As you all well know, we were facing a reduction in resource, and there are ways in which states have approached a reduction in resources, a variety of ways. But our interest in this particular task force was to identify reform, areas of reform that could help us deal with less resource, but yet better services, high quality services in higher education for the system. I think it also comes from a system-wide response, an effort to be a system, not a composite of units who respond to less resources. And this is a conversation that has had a remarkably broad participation. It amazed me as we were in the process of our task force, the number of people who came to the table who offered their thoughts. It was a broad funnel, you might say, of concerns and issues and perspectives. And I think these very carefully crafted items that you see before you come from that very broad discussion and the analysis of the discussion, and really bringing it down to a focus. I would also say that in my experience as being a regent, the clarity with which we have conversations has sometimes been remiss. And I think this really brings us to discuss things that matter. And there is no way that we can continue our past practices and expect new results. We absolutely have to pinpoint areas that mean a great deal to us, and I think this particular success agenda does that. And we've, I think, negotiated amongst ourselves to bring this kind of document. While it may not have even the detail that some of us would like to have, it, I think, does focus our system in a way that we haven't had before. And I would like to just remark that, you know, I've been a creature of committees all my professional life. I'm sure all of you have too. Life is a you know, a chaos of committees, but this is one that brought out of chaos some very important, very specific guiding principles on the one hand, and you know, this success agenda. And it is a serious conversation because we could drift in many other directions as other states. We see the tremendous pressures in California and Washington State, where across the board cuts are, you know, leading to hopeless results. We're not going that direction at all. And I think with intent, we're becoming a more mature system looking at this kind of document and the results of our conversation. And I think that also our conversations need to be recalled as we change. It particularly struck me today when we met with the faculty that we have changes in the leadership in the faculty that came together today. And we've had very arduous conversations with our faculty partners in the crafting of these success agenda items. And I'm just hoping that we can remember and recall and carry forward those very important conversations. Losing ground would be a very serious loss to us at this point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Regent Pease. Regent Buchanan.
First thing I need to say is everyone's saying thank you to me. That's not comprehensive enough. Lynn didn't miss a meeting, and the leadership behind this discussion, Tyler and Sheila, and this is not a one-person effort. This is a focus by a board saying, let's get a little bit more specific with how we go about accomplishing our strategic plan. So again, to the commitment made by everybody involved, couldn't be more appreciative. Angela, to you, or Regent McLean, to your suggestion that we incorporate, I think maybe what I might suggest is I'm looking at mine, I'm seeing some very important names missing from some other areas too, like at the top of it, it should say student success agenda, and that's what we're talking about. So if it's all right with you, might we consider this a dynamic document, one that of course is going to take some wordsmithing, and as we tackle these initiatives, the details are going to rise to the surface through further discussion. Maybe that's a way to, instead of going through all of the things that I'm recognizing need to be added and committed to this document, make sure that we incorporate that as we continue to mold this action plan in front of us. Thank you, Angela.
Okay, further board discussion? Okay, then if we will vote on this then, the adoption of this item number. At this time, I would call for public comment on the item. Is there any public comment on this item? Is there any comment from campus leaders or persons within our system? Professor Moisey, I guess I would say.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioner, and the Regents. I enjoyed that conversation we had with the Regents this morning about faculty involvement in this. And from the faculty perspective, I would like to articulate that we don't respond to performance-based funding and discussions about institutional role differentiation in a threatening way, but I see that as a good opportunity from a faculty perspective to really, and the top bullet there is under institutional role differentiation, very important to us, is sustaining quality of academic programs. And I think anything that we do that gets us in that direction, I think is very important. So I appreciate our involvement to this point and our continued meaningful involvement from this point on in this success agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Moisey. Mark O'Farrell.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Regents. My name is Mark O'Farrell. I public policy for MEMFT. I would just like to make some input here. I think in a document like this, and when I was part of the discussions, and I thank Regent Buchanan for inviting us into that. But I think this is an important document that I think will go out far and wide. And I think there needs to be a mention here in writing of faculty. I mean, you're discussing the faculty partnership here and how important that is. I think we need to see, our faculty need to see something in there that says, we recognize in a strategic plan that there's an issue. There's an issue with faculty salaries, there's an issue with recruitment and retention. And in a document such as this, I think it's really important that one of those numbers talks about faculty, salaries, recruitment, retention, retirement issues, any of those things that we need to face in a partnership. I think it's very important, and I think it would look great to our faculty that they would see that as part of your plan, and that would help build that partnership. Just my input. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marco. Any other comments? Okay, any further board discussion? Then seeing none, I would, well, we can just call for the vote. All those in favor of passage and adoption of item before us signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Again, thank you, all the regents that participated in this and the staff. This is a good document to move forward, and yes, it is dynamic, and I think to Marco's concerns and Regent McLean's concerns, certainly recognize faculty, staff is an important part of this, and we'll see that that gets added in as well. So thank you. We're a little behind time, but I think we will try to tackle these last few items. They shouldn't take too long, and then we'll take a break after that. We have bylaws revisions. I think Commissioner Stearns is going to start, and then we'll hear from Kathy Swift.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask Chief Legal Counsel Kathy Swift to approach the podium in case there are questions. But members of the board, you do have before you, and you've had before you, the changes. Most of them are not substantive. Probably the biggest is that we've cleaned some things up and shortened the workload, job descriptions, if you will, of the committees. Any additions to that, Kathy? Any comments before they make the motion and proceed? Thank you. Members of the board, you will need a motion.
Okay. Is there public comment on the motion before us? Any public comment? Is there campus input or campus leadership input on the item? Is there discussion from the board on this item? Okay. Seeing none of all the above, I will move it forward. And all those in favor of passage of the item before you, bylaw revision, signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Commissioner Stearns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to call forward our Director of American Indian Minority Achievement, Casey Murphy-Brazil, to tell us a little bit about the resolution in honor of American Indian Heritage Day, and to read an excerpt so that it can be adopted and in the record.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Stearns, members of the board. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to recognize American Indian Heritage Day. In 1997, the Montana legislature designated every fourth Friday in September as American Indian Heritage Day. And I know throughout various campuses, at the U of M, MSU, we have traditional dancers and singers and events occurring throughout the campuses on this coming Friday that will occur. And I think it's really important to recognize not only the American Indian Heritage Day, but also to take this moment and realize that recognizing the distinct and unique cultural heritage of American Indians is not something that we should do just one day out of the year. But in light of Indian Education for All in 20-1-501, that it's something that we need to do throughout all of our campuses, and not just on the fourth Friday in September, but throughout the year as we move through our classes and different disciplines. So, thank you.
Casey, does it seem to you, as it does to me, that one of the reasons should make a motion to adopt the resolution?
Yes.
Regent Pease.
Mr. Chairman, I move the adoption of the resolution on American Indian Heritage Day.
Okay. We would like to then move this forward for a vote. Is there any public comment on this item? Is there any campus or system comment on the item? Okay. Is there further board discussion? With that, then, we would call for a vote on the adoption of a resolution in support of American Indian Heritage Day. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Commissioner Stearns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last item before the break. Number one is that I would look forward to seeing in the November campus reports descriptions of the celebrations that have taken place on the campuses for this American Indian Heritage Day. We will read them with interest and appreciation in our office, and I know it'll be noticed across the state. Finally, in terms of campus reports, I want to thank the campuses. These are always descriptions of your points of pride. I call attention to them to folks across the state. If you want to know some highlights from each of the campuses in the university system, this is a really good place to find those. I will tell you, Mr. Chair, that I'm going to call on President Dennison for sure, possibly President Cruzado, for an item in which he requested in regard to campus report and that he wished to call some special attention to, if that is acceptable.
By all means, President Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to provide an update, a report on a project that we discussed earlier with the Regents that is moving along toward a request to you for approval. That request will not come forward until November, but this is a progress report which will alert you to the steps that have been taken to date. This project is the biomass gasification project on the university campus. What we have proposed to do is to construct a gasification system and attach it to our current boiler. That system will, once attached, reduce our natural gas consumption by 60%, and will also produce some cogeneration possibilities for us. So we'll get almost to a megawatt of cogeneration down the line that will come as a result of it. And in addition, once this technology is in place, it will significantly reduce the stack emissions from the campus. Why do we do this? Because of clearly what's happening in global warming and the need to become as carbon neutral as we can possibly become. And secondly, because there is, at this point in time, a product in the state which is available to do this sort of thing. Of course, the beetle kill stuff that you see around here everywhere, and the closing of Smurfit Stone in Missoula certainly underscored that effort for us. We can make a contribution to the economic development, the timber industry at the same time. And it's very compelling that we're, as a result of doing this, once it's in place, we will reduce our carbon footprint by about 23% in the immediate future. And over the long term, it goes even farther than that. So it's a very significant thing to do. The funding for the project, I need to alert you to as well, and we've had a good deal of assistance from the state. The governor has committed some qualified energy conservation bonds. Those bonds are very important because you sell them on the market, it's the market price, and then the feds cover 70% of the interest cost, which is a significant savings for us. This won't go quite all of the distance. We have somewhere around $7 to $8 million worth of those bonds, assuming Missoula as a city will also participate, and we think that's possible. That will still leave about $5.2 million that we will have to get in revenue bonds, and we will be asking for your support in going forward with that. This is a great environment for issuing debt. The interest rates are very, very low, and we will have the funding in the energy savings that we will realize that we can cover virtually all of this, most of it. We think we can get there, and we will have a detailed report on that when we come back to you in November. But in addition, we will, when we issue these bonds, we will probably refinance some of our existing bonds. And given the interest rates, that will generate significant savings, which can be dedicated, as they have in the past, toward other energy conservation efforts on the campus. We'll have that detail a little later. You heard yesterday as well that a couple of the campuses are thinking that they might want to do housing projects, and if so, those should be folded into this bond issue, because we can get a very good rate, and all we have to do is work out the details with regard to 125% of the debt requirement in revenue before we get there. So this is all very beneficial. It will also finally help the campus when we do this, primarily because what will happen is that we'll get a good deal of the beetle kill from the Lubeck Forest, which is our own. That will also finance students who work up there and give them the experience in managing these kinds of issues on a forest of that large. It's about 3,000 acres up there. And secondly, the COT is now planning an alternative energy technician program, which will be implemented at the same time that this goes forward. So, Mr. Chairman, Madam Commissioner, that's the update. You'll hear more about it in November. Thank you.
Thank you, President Edison. Appreciate that update. Commissioner Stearns.
Thank you. I'm not sure, President Cruzado, did you have a heads up for us as well?
Yes. Mr. Chair,
President
members of the
Cruzado.
board, we're having some very exciting times at Montana State University. We have many new projects that we're very proud of. Just last week, we celebrated the reopening of the renovated Gaines Hall. Many of you had the opportunity of taking classes there, and if you come and take a look at it, what a very nice student-centered building it is right now. It is a building full with many doors, with many lights. It's our first LEED certified building, and this is a very important structure for us. Just last year, in terms of visits to our advising center that is housed right there in Gaines, we had over 10,000 students. So that's almost every student in the Bozeman campus at one moment or another has an opportunity to visit our advising center. And just this morning we were talking about the importance of advising as we continue to recruit and retain and advance our students in their careers. With Gaines, with the upcoming inauguration of our Animal Bioscience building, and with the start of the renovations for Cooley Labs, I think that we are setting the stage for an even more productive portfolio in terms of research at Montana State University. Just think about it. Just this last summer, we announced a new record for research expenditures in Bozeman of 109.5. So imagine what these new facilities will mean when we when we put this in the hands of our very capable faculty, of our wonderful graduate students, and with the addition of the fact that every undergraduate student at Montana State University has a hands-on experience. So we are very excited about these facilities. Not to mention about the wonderful opportunity that we just had also in opening the Gallatin College programs. Thank you, Regent Barrett and Regent Peace for attending our inauguration. We moved that facility to Hamilton Hall. That's the second oldest building in campus, but now with this renovation, it looks absolutely majestic. I think that we are being very successful in sending the message, a clear message to the student that attend the Gallatin College program, that they are literally at the center of everything we do at Montana State University. If you haven't had an opportunity to visit these buildings, we will be happy to welcome you in Bozeman. Billings, well actually, Billings, Northern, and Great Falls, and Bozeman as well, as we will continue to report registered record enrollment numbers this fall. We will have more updated and official data for you in our meeting tomorrow. But we are absolutely happy because the message about Montana State University being a student-centered institution continues to be very, very clear. Northern has done tremendous strides in terms of student recruitment. We are very happy. They continue to catch the attention of the eye of the nation in terms of the wonderful things that we're doing with our diesel programs. They have also attracted $3 million in research expenditures just last year. For an institution of that size, that is absolutely commendable. And I think that it only sets the stage for more programs in the future. Also, I just wanted to mention our health programs in Great Falls continue to grow. And I would be remiss if I do not appreciate the initiative that the students and the faculty showed. When I went to one of my visits to Great Falls, they mentioned that they had some very specific needs for their health and nursing students. They mentioned that they were conducting some tests using some animals. They were using rabbits, they were using pigs, and they would say, wouldn't it be great if we were to give our students the opportunity to have these tests with humans, particularly with a cadaver. Well, we took that request back to Bozeman. Thanks to the WAMI program, Bozeman is the institution that manages the cadaver program in the state. And so we were able to file all the paperwork, obtain all the necessary permissions and authorizations, and now our students in Great Falls have that very unique opportunity that only some a very limited number of institutions in the nation provide our two-year students with that very unique opportunity. So, but this was a grassroots effort. This was because I went there, I attended a class, I went there very timidly. I thought that the students were going to ask the routine questions. These students knew exactly what their academic programs needed to bring it to the next level of excellence. And thanks to them, I think that Great Falls will benefit for many years to come. So again, we have many exciting projects in the pipeline. And thank you.
Thank you, President Cruzado. Commissioner Stearns. I would like to say I'm so conditioned after 7 months of searching that we always refer to candidates as candidates, and even candidate 12 by number. But the person I was speaking of and the internal candidate that we will be moving forward is our own Royce Ingstrom. And it would have been nice to use his name at this point. We could drop the candidate, but all right, we are at Two-Year Education Workforce Development Committee. Regent Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item on our agenda is the dual enrollment operational guidelines, and I'm going to call on Deputy Commissioner Moe.
Madam Chair, members of the board,
I am pleased to bring before you the dual enrollment operational guidelines. This has been about a 5-year effort, and we're hoping that we're getting toward the end of the process. In order to describe the process and the various stakeholders that have been involved in it, I've invited some panelists to participate in this agenda item, and I only see 2 of them in the room right now. But if, TJ, if you would come up, Heidi is here. I'm hoping that we will see Daniel Bingham coming in any moment, and Marco Farrell. Daniel, if you'll join the table, and
Marco is coming.
there he is. Marco, if you'll join us at the table as well. Daniel is going to explain the process that we've been involved in for the past several months.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner. A couple of things that I've been asked to go over and just give you a rundown as to the process that we followed starting in May of this last year in developing the dual enrollment program or process that we've gotten to today. We've had 2 major committees involved in this particular discussion. The Dual Enrollment Committee, which was made up of individuals from 2-year education, both CEO and CAOs. We've had representation from MEAMFT, school superintendents. We've had someone from the Office of Public Instruction. We've had on-campus staff and faculty in regards to current or the programs with dual enrollment, such as concurrent enrollment, early college on campus, and early college online. And then we had, as a second major group, was the CEOs for all 2-year colleges across the state. Now, that was just the 2 major groups that were involved. However, throughout the state of Montana, we've had tremendous amount of input and asked for input across the state from other leadership councils and faculty councils and senates, boards of public instruction, a board of education, members of the Board of Regents, tribal colleges, and macro. Virtually, I think we've met or had given everybody the opportunity across the state, or probably across the country, from Key West, Florida to Barrows, Alaska, have had an opportunity to give input on dual enrollment so that we made sure that everybody had the opportunity to share with us what we thought was important. As you can remember, last May we had a discussion about dual enrollment, and I think this is one of the reasons why Deputy Commissioner Moe really reached out to everybody within the state to give them an opportunity to participate because of the intricacies and the difficultness of putting this together and providing a comprehensive educational opportunities for our secondary or post-secondary or secondary education group. And so basically that's what we have put together. Again, I don't know if there's anybody that was left out. I have a pile of renditions of this particular document that I think if we were to repurpose that, I probably could take care of all the paper needs for Helena for the next 2 years. So I think we've done a great job. Deputy Moe has done a great job in making sure everybody has participated in that.
Thank you, Dean Bingham. And next, Marco, if you would talk to us about the concerns from MEAMFT perspective and particularly the K through 12 participants.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. It was our pleasure to serve on this committee. And you talked earlier today, and we mentioned partnerships, and this was, I think, a perfect example of a partnership that worked very well together. I really appreciate the efforts of Commissioner Moe and the rest of the panel, the committee. Couple of issues that we had with that were addressed in here, and number one is the concurrent enrollment model, and that's a model that we had an opportunity to witness a few years ago. Several of us from MEMFT and Board of Public Ed and OPI went down to witness it in Salt Lake City, and we really talked to teachers, and we really enjoyed that model, and we're glad that it's spelled out here in that relationship that we might have to the national standards for that model. If you go through the plan on section B, page 2C, one of the things that interests our members in the K-12 community about dual credit not replacing high school curriculum. I think we've come up with some very good language there that it really serves as a guideline for not only higher ed but K-12 as well, and how we might effectively and appropriately use dual credit courses. In the faculty section, section D, this is primarily where we had our input. In section 2, we of course are extremely concerned about licensure, and we've done a lot of work in that area and around the Class 8 licensure for K-12, and we're pleased that that's been put in here and that we had some great discussions about that, as well as, you know, the concurrent enrollment faculty meet your standards as well. And I think that's very important that we've come together on that. As in section 3, as you know, Montana is a strong collective bargaining state, and we sit in a unique position where we represent faculty and K-12 teachers, and so it was very important to us that something be said in this document about compensation and working conditions around dual credit, dual enrollment classes, and that they be simply bargained through collective bargaining. And so there was some back and forth on that, but we're glad that that got put in there. The orientation and the embracement of high school faculty or high school teachers into number 4 in terms of, again, that NACEP model. This is a wonderful thing that our teachers at K-12 level will be embraced in the faculties at the 2-year colleges, both in professional development and as essentially adjuncts. I think we will see that relationship bear a lot of fruit. At least the discussions we've had with those folks that were doing that down in the Salt Lake area, those high school teachers were very excited about being considered adjunct faculty at that local community college, and there was a lot of good things that happened because of it. So it was a really, again, I agree with Daniel that it was a cumbersome process a little bit at times, lots of emails, but it was well worth it, and again, on behalf of MEMFT, we just appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. And speaking to us from the campus and community perspective, Dr. Heidi Pasick.
Thank you. Members of the board, Deputy Commissioner Mo asked me to kind of give you an example of how some of us are putting the guidelines into practice kind of on the ground. So we all see dual enrollment programs as the kind of things that can help high school students to transition to college. And in Great Falls, we're working as a community to actually increase access to higher education through a K-12 articulation work group that is part of a community-wide effort to develop our regional workforce, to get our students college ready, and to strengthen our economy. The work group brings together administrators and faculty from higher education, our local school district, and regional businesses, industry, and our healthcare leaders, with that focus and emphasis on, as I said before, college readiness and early college and concurrent enrollment. Some of the modalities that we use are face-to-face. We use a variety online. We've even done a recent partnership with the Montana Digital Academy with the folks at Missoula College of Technology. And we're trying to also establish pathways that lead to credential completion by using dual credit, by using the pathways, so that, you know, in the future we may even see some of our students graduating with either a completed credential or maybe a first year. Some of the things that we're experimenting with now are the transfer core, which in Great Falls we're actually transcripting to count that as a success. Also the Sustainable Energy Technician Program. We're doing some things with auto collision and repair also that allow students to do through dual enrollment the first year Certificate of Applied Science in the second half of their day, and actually we hope have a credential by the time they graduate. We're also working on nursing and business. And one of the great things that has really supported our ability to do this, and Marco talked a little bit about this, is getting the faculty licensed, our faculty licensed to be able to do the dual enrollment, and also connecting the high school faculty to our campus. They are considered adjunct faculty. They are given a stipend. They participate in department meetings. They're very, very connected. They use our syllabi in their courses with our objectives for the concurrently enrolled things that we're doing in the high school. So we've built a nice model that kind of involves our whole educational community in Great Falls. So I thought you might enjoy hearing a little bit more about how we're putting some of these guidelines into practice. Been such an important partner in this process. Dennis Parman served on the committee, but TJ and I have worked together these past 2 years as Perkins directors in our respective offices. So I'd like TJ to explain to you how this dual enrollment piece fits into the larger picture of high school to college transitions.
Thank you, Commissioner Moe, for the opportunity. Chairman, Regents. In a partnership with the Commissioner of Higher Ed, we've been working the past 2 years at least to develop a mechanism to present these dual enrollment opportunities, the work that has been done on the post-secondary and secondary level to students, parents, faculty, administrators on the secondary level. And what we've done is created a framework for what we're terming Big Sky pathways. And these pathways are technology-based through the Montana Career Information System that is available to all schools, all students, parents who have internet access. And it is a framework that allows a student to create a plan. And the dual enrollment is the transitional piece. It's the value-added piece. The high schools have had plans, they've had curriculum for many, many years, but they haven't had that transitional piece to post-secondary. And this is one of the value-added things that we're trying to give students to allow them to plan, to save money, to expose themselves. No, that's not the right way to put that. Expose their educational future to post-secondary opportunities. And through this, we have developed the Big Sky Pathway Initiative that later on this fall, we are getting all secondary schools and many of the post-secondary two-year institutions together to create relationships to foster more of these dual enrollment opportunities to follow these guidelines and take advantage of this work. Commissioner Moe's office has been integral in including us in that process. And we are very pleased to be able to move forward with this because Montana has needed this definition and guidelines for many, many years, and now we're able to take advantage of that. Thank you.
Thank you, TJ. Madam Chairman, the basic nugget of the dual enrollment guidelines is that the two-year colleges are the regional hubs for dual enrollment in their areas. And the reasoning behind this is that, one, we have a number of two-year colleges. They're spread strategically across the state and are optimally positioned not only to deliver those services with a local touch that is I think very important to the quality of advising and the connection between the high school and the college, but also important to the rebranding of two-year education in Montana as folks throughout Montana recognize that these are colleges with the full range of two-year college opportunities at an affordable price. I would be remiss, I think, if I didn't mention that the governor's office has been instrumental in the past, and if I could have Dan talk about that a little bit, because they've definitely been a catalyst in this particular project.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and Deputy Commissioner Moe. We, as you all know, sort of our big three: transferability, dual enrollment, distance learning. This is the I think most concrete example of how we're making great strides on all three. We look forward to the adoption of these standards, and we also look forward to the campuses and the Commissioner's office jointly figuring out what I think is one of the major hurdles that's left, and that is the common pricing across the state. If you can get me something before November, I'd really appreciate it.
Mr. Villa, that is our intent, to have the remaining two pieces in place, the definition of the regions and how they'll operate, as well as the funding model in place by November for the board to approve, because the campuses enter into the interlocal agreements that are really the foundation for dual enrollment in the spring semester, and in the larger communities pretty early, February or so. And so it will be important to have some clarity about that by that time. The last person, oh, wait, go ahead.
If I may, Madam Chairman and Deputy Commissioner Moe, I have a question for Mr. Villa. Did I hear a hint in there that you would like something by November, and meaning not the November meeting, but because you are
We have a Board of Ed agenda.
We have a Board of Ed agenda, and we're also preparing a governor's budget and leading up to November?
Statute says we do, but, you know.
Members of the Assembly, one of the things that we are doing with College Now funds is helping to buy down some dual enrollment tuition across the state to help level it out. But one of the things I think he was implying is that is a complex piece, and we know the kind of budget the governor's kind of facing, but I think I heard a hint in there, let's at least talk a little bit more about working together on that piece of, if we can work together. Am I putting words in your mouth, Mr. Villa, that we can at least talk?
I've been given the charge of staying boring at these meetings, so I wouldn't read too much into it, but I think that there's a lot of opportunities here over the course of the next couple of years with Lumina. You know, we want to make, if we can get this done, this will put Montana light years ahead of some of our competitors. As we look at coming out of the Great Recession, having that workforce in place will be a critical piece. When we start looking at that 2013 time frame, the more dual enrollment we can get, feed into the two-year programs across the state, we're now looking at having a well-prepared, well-credentialed population ready for, you know, what will be the post-recession expansion. So we're on the right time frame.
Finally, I would like my colleague, Dr. Moore, the Deputy Commissioner for Academic Research and Student Affairs, to talk about the research that we've done in other states that has guided the development of the guidelines.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Moe, Mr. Chairman, Board of Regents. This has been an interesting arena. I've conveniently left most of it to Dr. Moe. And then suddenly found myself being roped in because there were lots of things that just needed a few more people talking to people across the country. Up through and including in August, when I happened to sit next to a gentleman from Kentucky who had strong experience in this, and also was sitting in the room with Utah folks who had strong experience. And we started some questions about concurrent enrollment and who should and shouldn't be in those classes. And it was really interesting to find the difference between the ideal world and reality. And the ideal world would be that students that are in concurrent enrollment would only be taking the course for college credit. And that would mean they were all academically prepared, and that they would then be able to benefit from that course. And if we weren't able to put a class like that together, then hopefully you would go online. But what we find is that we're, you know, more rural than rural, and the reality hits us that sometimes that just isn't going to be feasible. And so one of the things that was written into this document was the honors course designation and the differentiated instruction. And we feel like our colleagues across the country are pretty strong in the sentiment that the best practice is to have everybody take it for college credit. And I think as we see Mr. Villa and others working with us in support of this, that will happen in Montana over time, that we will evolve our model to making sure that it is the very best environment for students to succeed and all students to succeed. So not to have some that risk not doing as well in those concurrent courses simply because they're not prepared. But I think that the the national consultation has also pointed out that what Deputy Commissioner Moe and the people here and all the many others who've worked at this has done a model that is somewhat revolutionary, and I think, Mr. Villa, you're right on that, that this is going to put Montana at someplace in the front of the pack, and so we move forward.
Madam Chair, as you know, one of the key focuses of College Now has been to increase the number of high school students engaged in college coursework. And at the time that we did our policy audit, we were last in the West and I think maybe fourth to the last in the nation for the percentage of our students under 18 who were so engaged. So we're interested in improving in that area, but also making sure that it's purposeful, that the efforts that students make toward gathering accruing some college credit are also credits that are going to save their time toward degree and hopefully their expense. So we've done a bit of all of that. We are going to open it up now for comment from the campuses and the public and also from the regents. So, Madam Chair, that's your job.
Thank you, Dr. Moe. Is there, oh, Regent Hayes.
Thank you, Chairman Hamilton. We were able to meet with the tribal colleges thanks to the Commissioner's Office and the Dean of Students from Chief Dolknife College calling a meeting on September 2nd. And I thought it would be just important for you all to know what's occurring with the 7 tribal colleges in dual enrollment, dual credit. Because we see that when guidelines are passed by the university system, they certainly impact other parts of the post-secondary education community. We found that Chief Dolknife and Fort Peck Community College are the 2 of the 7 that have active and in-place programs with reservation, and that is the schools that are on or near the reservations. So Chief Dolknife is serving the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, and Fort Peck is serving the Assiniboine and Sioux Fort Peck Indian Reservation. The other 5 colleges had conversations. They have cooperative agreements for school-college programming extensively over at least a decade, some more. But no, those 5 colleges had no in-place dual enrollment, dual credit opportunities, but looked forward to some. Just to typify what Chief Dolknife was doing, they have been offering extensive dual enrollment, dual credit in American Indian Studies in tribal languages. And so that, but they were doing in English and mathematics. And it had also to do with what they call a circle of honor. All the schools with the college have been working on a curriculum articulation there, and they're very much into this agreement and a relationship, and the dual enrollment, dual credit is a part of that. At Fort Peck Community College, we've been offering dual enrollment, dual credit for 12 years in 5 school districts, not consistently, some in school districts more than others. We have a math science curriculum articulation agreement with our reservation schools, and math is certainly a part of what we're offering for it as a part of the program. But we've also stepped forward to do a welding dual enrollment, dual credit, so that students in Wolf Point School take the first semester of welding in our certificate program and can finish after 1 semester at Fort Peck Community College. Some of the issues that arose in our discussion is that the schools that we're working with have become somewhat cautious in working with us based on the development of these guidelines. In spite of the fact that we're on reservations and perhaps somewhat beyond the reach of state guideline. But the schools will have a responsibility, for example, for reporting this activity. And we did discuss with Joyce Silverthorne and talking about what they would be reporting, and we are concerned that schools may even come to a point of backing away from our arduously and hard work cooperative agreements that have been in place. We also see that when we have dual enrollment, dual credit for American Indian Studies and Tribal Studies, that somehow we don't see perhaps the guidelines extending to that area. But, you know, we need to study all of these things. It is clear, however, that in 2 of the 7 cases, the curriculum enrollment, the curriculum alignment efforts have been in place for a number of years and are very important. And we're just really very much hoping that those will not be impacted in a negative fashion by the agreements made by other parties in this discussion. We certainly were called to the table, but it's difficult sometimes to, well, you know, we can say we're concerned about certain issues, but to see how they might be accommodated in this guideline. So I would just offer that to let you know that there are a number of other institutions, certainly in the 2-year colleges in Montana, that are involved in this activity.
Thank you, Regent Pease. At this time, I'm going to ask for any public comment on this item. Okay. We'll go to a question from Regent McLean.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the board, first of all, I guess I just have a question to clarify something. When we attended the NASEP conference a couple of years ago, we as a state were not members at that time, and I'm wondering if we are now?
Madam Chair, Regent McLean, to my knowledge, we are not. However, we are sending a delegation to the NASEP conference and hoping to do 2 things. One, get our foot in the water in terms of best practice for concurrent enrollment, and also identify potential consultants that we'll bring back here through College Now to help us launch the new model in the best way, and that may very well involve becoming a part of NASEP.
Thank you. And then, Madam Chair, my question is for Mr. Iyer and maybe Ms. Silverthorne from the Office of Public Instruction. In regards to the launching of the Big Sky Pathways, and you talked about that as the transition piece, I guess I'm just wondering, is that the launching of the website for parents to access all of that information?
Madam Chair, Regent McLean, we are working with a process this fall to bring, there are 9 post-secondary institutions on the 2-year level that are inviting every school, every secondary school to work on their pathways so that they actually are true pathways. They lead somewhere. They have dual enrollment opportunities included in them. And we build relationships with not only faculty but counselors as well. And that's really our process that we're working on. We're in the process now of aligning on a regional level what those relationships can be, and basic on pathways as well, and what the secondary schools chose and what the post-secondary schools have programs to offer.
Thank you very much for clarifying that for me. The word website stuck in my mind there. I guess I just want to reiterate the funding piece and the importance of that. I am deeply concerned as we move forward with this, and I think that the guidelines are a very important and positive step, that the funding mechanism and the work being done on that take place with due haste, as I am very concerned that we are continuing to widen that achievement gap between our economically disadvantaged students and those who are not. And I think that the work that you will do to communicate with high schools in regards to the Big Sky Pathways, and I know that Dr. Stearns and Dr. Moe plan to make some presentations this fall, and to raise awareness about the opportunities for dual enrollment will mitigate some of the lack of dual enrollment opportunities in our most rural, most remote parts of the state. And then finally, I just would like to thank Deputy Commissioner Moe and all of you for your extraordinary work on these dual enrollment guidelines. I think that they are workable parameters. And I would offer that when I first came on the Board of Public Education, this was something that had been tossed around and discussed, and it really came to fruition under the leadership of Dr. Moe, and I think that that speaks volumes about your ability to bring the right people to the table and raise the right issues and the right focus, and I think ultimately that was student achievement, and I cannot say it enough. I appreciate your great work, and I look forward to watching how these guidelines materialize and promote student achievement across Montana. Thank you for your great work, and thank all of you for coming today and enlightening me further about where we're about to go.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, I was going to move to that. I was trying to get there, really. Regent Pease?
Yes, Madam Chairman, one of the issues that came up in discussion was the establishment of regional hubs and how that intersects or interacts with the tribal colleges that have certainly service area well established by their charters. And that, I think, remains a question because there will be obvious overlapping regions. So, you know, our hope in our discussion was that those regions would be made amicably clear, and so that all of the colleges and schools will be able to step forward using the guideline.
Madam Chair and Regent Pease, in light of that discussion, we have held off on advancing the regions until we're sure that we have the tribal colleges and the other providers at the table when we do that. We are going to, in a later agenda item, bounce a draft as a possibility for what the regions might look like, so that we can get some feedback from all of you before we go out and have those discussions.
Any other regions with questions? Seeing none, we'll ask for public comment on this agenda item. If you'd go to the podium, please.
Members of the board, I'm Kathy Hughes, Flathead Valley Community College, and I'd like to thank Deputy Commissioner Moe and all the people that worked on the guidelines. Just would like to comment on a couple things from a number of years of experience as an evaluator with the Northwest Commission on Colleges. I'd like to comment particularly on the concurrent enrollment model, that we'd be careful that courses that we award credit for, no matter where or how they're offered, meet the college's standards, including the instructor credentials, the course outcomes, etc. For example, at Flathead Valley Community College, we have our adjunct faculty that are high school faculty are part of our departments. They come to in-service, they come to department meetings, they follow the college syllabus, use the same text, often have the same final exam. So I think that's really important, and I think the guidelines reflect that. Because of that, I'd like to really emphasize that I think the regional hub model is the best model, because it would be difficult to have that connection with the high school faculty without using your college that's the closest to you. So, thank you.
Any additional public comment? Any additional comment from campuses? Any comment from faculty or students? Seeing none, members of the oh, I'm sorry. It's hard to see down here.
Madam Chair and the Regents, from the faculty perspective, and I agree that the assessment outcomes should be the same as they are in college classes, and anecdotally what I hear from a lot of faculty is that if students aren't prepared at a 100 level, where it really becomes obvious is when they take the 200 or 300 level course. And I'm wondering if there's some other way that we can get some data to support that isn't the case, that students are coming out of these as prepared. And I'm not sure if that means adding something to this, or that OCHI can collect that data.
Madam Chairman, Neil, and you can call me Mary too. The guidelines actually do anticipate that, because we do want to see that students are truly prospering from dual enrollment, because even though it isn't apparent on the surface, there is an investment on from both sectors to make sure that these students do in fact succeed. So that process is made much easier by Common Course numbering, because it's a little easier to see exactly what the preparation has been. But there's a data collection piece in the guidelines that should cover that.
Thanks. Members of the committee, this is an action item on our agenda, and so I would like to see some nods of head, maybe in consensus, that we would move this forward for the vote tomorrow. Thank you. The next item on our agenda are two discussion items. The first is the focused MUS transfer corps. Deputy Commissioner Moe.
Oh, I'm sorry, David, I jumped the gun a little bit. I'm going to have David join us for the discussion on the regions, and so he'll come to where the panel was. You previously heard me refer to this particular aspect of College Now as being the Regents Transfer Corps. And the idea behind it was to take a subset of the the MUS transferable corps and make it sort of a surefire transfer tool for students. In the discussion that you had this morning with faculty, I talked to you about the difficulty of advising, particularly on a two-year campus. When you're a smaller campus, advising for students is quite often done by faculty who are also teaching full-time, and they're trying to keep track of the requirements of majors across various campuses so that they can advise students well. So the idea behind this particular, I've changed the name from the Regents Transfer Corps because the General Education Council thought that there were too many corps and that it became confusing. And I have to thank Dr. McGregor in our office, as well as Dr. Jan Kleinert, who helped with the materials that you see in front of you today, that they've renamed that concept to be called Choices That Count. And I just want to emphasize the things that are on the cover memo, if you will, to the initiative. First of all, why are we doing it? We want to improve transfer rates. You saw in the material that Associate Commissioner Trevor presented to you earlier that you would think that we would have more transfer than we actually do, although if it is in fact true that the community colleges are not included in that data, that number would probably be significantly higher, because the transfer mission there has been emphasized so much over the course of their existence, whereas only 2 of the 5 colleges of technology have a transfer mission of any duration and significance. So we're wanting to change that, but the desirability of transfer in terms of how it makes education more affordable for students is something that we should be promoting. The second is that as we bring the transfer mission to the co-located colleges of technology, which is a major strategy of College Now, we need to look at how do we niche that differently from the general education program that is already on the 4-year campus. And this may be a way to do it. It not only creates a distinctly different choice for students, but also, minimizes the number of courses that co-located campus may need to offer through that environment. And finally, it encourages a kind of coordinated approach to transfer across campuses that would allow particularly the smaller 2-year campuses to work together to create 2+2 articulations that use the as we're calling it, Choices That Count pathway as the first year of that programming. And so with that for background, the matrix that is included as the Choices That Count document I present to you. And basically what you see is that what a number of us did in trying to create this was take the framework for the MUS transferable core, which has 6 disciplines and requires a total of 10 courses across those disciplines. And then identify the courses using the, again, great advantage of Common Course numbering, that you can actually identify the courses that most students are taking anyway, and verify that those are also commonly required in majors, and then see if you can't focus them and identify the courses that are most versatile in terms of applying to a number of majors. And when we first started out this process, I thought it was just going to be, no, actually I thought it was going to be horrible. I was impressed with the cakewalk. But it's very premature because the campuses have not vetted it enough. But I wanted it to come to you, starting to use this expression a lot now, before I'm gone, because I want you to see its potential. And I also want you to take a look at how many of these courses apply across majors, how much they would do to help us to track the effectiveness of preparation, because as Professor Moisey was saying, and he and I have discussed, there's sort of what I think of as death by anecdote. In the course of going around to the campuses to support Dr. McGregor in the transfer initiative, I heard a bit from faculty senates about, well, you know, the community college preparation is just not it, and you can't really drill down to, you know, what are we talking about here for numbers. So Common Course numbering really gives you a way of tracking that I think is important. But most important of all, it allows students to have a simplified way of looking at, here's the area I'm thinking of going into. Here is the community college or two-year college that I am planning to attend. And what are the courses that I can take here that are not only going to meet the requirements to complete the MUS core, but are also going to meet requirements that are in the major. So I think it's really a neat product, but there's still a lot of work to be done with it. And in the cover memo, I tell you the particular challenges. The first one is that it hasn't been, we first disseminated this at the beginning of August. That's not a good time to reach faculty. And even though I held off until the last possible moment to put this on the Regents' agenda, the startup of school is not a great time either to reach faculty and have them do the kinds of analysis that they need to do. So there has been some preliminary analysis, but it's crucial to the success of this product that students really know that that receiving institution has looked at it and has said, yes, those choices will count toward the completion of that particular major. And so that work still needs to be done. The second thing is that the policy itself on the MUS transfer core, which is policy 301.10, needs a little bit of clarification in that the policy does say that students will not need to take any more lower division general education coursework after they've completed that MUS transferable core. And in fact, in some majors they will. Even though, for instance, in elementary education, the two courses that are listed there, I think under humanities and fine arts, I believe they're Intro to Lit and Music Appreciation, they are required in that major and they will help you complete that MUS core, you're still going to need to take a third one in that area in order to meet the requirements of elementary education. So we're just not communicating as clearly as we can in that area. And finally, a number of majors require stats, and it's kind of a good example of a next step that needs to happen. I think 5 of the 6 four-year campuses offer stats, but the prerequisite is different in 4 out of the 5 so that in some cases a high school student who is interested in taking stats for dual enrollment purposes would not need to take college algebra first, but in others they would. And so I would like to see some conversation probably at the flock level in terms of the prerequisites, because, oh, I'm sorry, it's a bunch of sheep. I'm glad I asked. Little Bo Peep. The flock is the Faculty Learning Outcomes Council, who are charged with identifying the outcomes and also the common course numbering for courses within a particular discipline. But when you see the number of times that that particular course is required, I can't really put that on that chart and say take this and it's going to suffice, because there's a hidden course in there on some of the campuses. And maybe that's necessary, but it does seem like it's a conversation that the faculty should have, and a valuable one to have in terms of communicating to students well about what their preparedness should be. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have about it.
Any questions from the board? This is a discussion item, and as Deputy Commissioner Moe indicated, the work continues. Any public comment on this item? Any comment from the campuses? Can I go faculty or students and then call on you? Commissioner. Oh. Regent Bourne.
Sorry, I missed my call. I was hoping to know, when you have this laid out in a spreadsheet, are you going to be noting on here that, like in elementary education, you're still going to have to take another core? Is that going to be part of the spreadsheet?
Madam Chairman, Regent Borenpole. We've tried in the introduction to it to say that, and because it's true in a number of majors, if you're a math major, you're going to end up taking a lot more math courses, and many people in the room would say that those aren't really general education courses if that is your major. But I don't know that students always understand that. So I think what we need to say to students is that there's a foundational preparation that we all recognize within the system, which is this MUS transferable core. However, within a particular major, there may be other courses that you need to take in a particular discipline. But what we want to assure them is that these 30 credits that constitute that, I think of it almost as a first year, although it may not be literally, they count. They are 30 of the total credits that you need to take towards your degree, and they're not elective. They meet requirements.
Regent Pease?
Deputy Commissioner Moe, in one of the earlier presentations that you made, you observed the number of courses that were considered general ed acceptable on all our campuses, and I thought that was an amazing number. What was it?
It was just shy of 1,500 courses.
Yeah, that's just amazing. I think that this is a big step forward in saying to our students and parents, this is what is that. This accomplishes that core, and it also narrows down from the perspective, I think, of the campuses of really what is very useful to make that core possible for fields of study. I know it probably won't narrow all the thousands of courses out there, but I think this is just and it's also helped by the transferability initiative. So I'd just like to mention this is a whole lot of work come down to some focus that's just tremendous.
Regent, or Madam Chairman, Regent Pease, I think the list that is in front of you in the green, you know, is too small, frankly. When it goes back to the campuses, I think you're going to see it get longer. But I've been pretty, you know, show me. So you really have two different kinds of things going on. On the one hand, each campus has its own general education program, and they want students to have a variety of choices, and that's part of the breadth of offerings that makes going to college so much fun. But there is this other purpose that we have, which in the sense of, and I think it's particularly appropriate for the MUS transferable core, where we're not wanting students to make choices that they're going to have to remake upon transfer.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on something that I think that you, Madam Chairman, will remember well, and it was a listening session about 6, 7, 8 years ago in Havre when a citizen said, Commissioner Stearns, in the Montana University system, everything transfers, but nothing counts. I don't know that I ever relayed that anecdote to Dr. Moe, but I think, you know, naming this choices that count responds to that. It should be, ideally, a great advising tool for those students who really want to focus and, you know, and aren't there. Many students are, as you say, for lots of good reasons, wanting to get a flavor of the 1,500 courses or more that meet general education requirements. But others, as you and I think believe Regent Taylor commented at a meeting, I think about 8 months ago, commented that there are many students who don't want that many choices, and they want the advising tool to be clearer, more narrow, for them to proceed toward the associate or baccalaureate degree. And so I really commend Mary for this work, and I hope that as it goes through the faculty learning outcome councils and the faculty advice, that you heard that message in there about the hidden courses, and that we do our best for the choices that count pathway, that we make it as streamlined and student-friendly and still high quality as possible. As many of you know, whether it came to transferability or anything else, if Mary Moe was behind it, it was like having a great big hammer, and it was pounding, and it could come right down on you, if you weren't doing your part to advance the agenda. So, Mary, we pledge, I'm glad you got this out here, we pledge when you, after you are gone. I don't like that expression either. Let's see. Many of you may know that this is her final meeting because she's retiring November 1st, so that's why we are saying that. But that this is a really important, complex initiative, and we value the fact that you've advanced it this far, and we'll do our best to keep it going forward and getting conclusion on these choices that count hardcore.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I think in the conversations that you and I have had with the public over the course of the past 2 years and more, that it's hard to explain the complexities of the transfer issue. I think that people think that it's as simple as Common Course numbering,
Which was so simple.
Right. But simply knowing that the course you're taking is the same as the course that is offered at another campus is only part of the equation of transfer. The other part of it is, are you taking the particular course that your major is going to require, and that is going to move you through your program of study in a non-duplicative fashion. And the analogy that I have used is that it's kind of like if you're going to take a trip. If you pack your suitcase thinking that you are going to go to Belgium, and you decide at the airport, I think I'll go to Hawaii instead, the things in your suitcase aren't going to work there. And so it isn't enough just to know that, you know, a shoe in Montana is also a shoe in Belgium. You need to know that you've got the right things in there that apply toward the destination that you have in mind. So that's the goal.
And I think, members of the committee, that's just leads into our conversation that we had this morning with faculty on the importance of advising and the importance of having tools in the toolbox that, in particular, advisors on the smaller campuses have available to them that allow them to know when curriculum changes in a program on a larger campus where students traditionally transfer to. So I think this is wonderful work, and again, it's a culmination of a lot of years of conversations and hard work on the part of staff in the Commissioner's office and on the campuses. So thank you, Deputy Commissioner Moe, for all your work. Now, did I do public comment on this? Okay.
Yes, and I would like to introduce you to Dr. David Hall, who is now sitting where the panel was. And David is the coordinator for the College Now initiative. He's been an invaluable asset to me as we've moved this agenda forward over the last year. He came to the position having been the director of the Wired grant, with which you're familiar. How many year project was that, David? 4? Yes. David is going to talk to you about the possibilities for the regional hub concept. And Summer, if you would pull up the PowerPoint, I think it is. We have fiddled around with a lot of different approaches to the regional hub, and some of them have scared me so much that I wouldn't even send them via email to Sheila. I would bring them to her in person in a paper bag. But yes, right. One of the things that we feel is important is to have the regions parallel other regional efforts that you see happening at the state level. And so David is going to walk you through 3 of those efforts before showing you the approach to regions that we think might work.
Madam Chair and committee, before we actually look at the maps, I want to remind you that the second mission for Lumina for our College Now program very much lays out the need for regional hubs. Montana's 2-year colleges have a mission of responding in regional needs to workforce development, high school college transitions. And as part of the College Now initiative, the mission is to be delivered through regional hubs. So as Deputy Commissioner Moe said, we started looking at what other agencies around the state are using for regional breakdowns. The first one that we have up here is Department of Commerce, which we do work quite extensively with all of these groups as far as workforce readiness. In this particular case, here are the regions that they have come up with across the state. And again, if you'll keep in mind where we have 2-year campuses and how these regions might be delivered by those campuses. Summer, if you'd put up the next one, which is the Job Service Workforce Center regional areas. They're a much larger number than what the Department of Commerce has, but again, very doable as far as within their particular mission. And those come real close to matching up with OPI's professional development regions, which is the third map that we present you. they've numbered them differently, and I don't know if that's good or bad. I started to ask why Commerce numbers from left to right, and OPI, whom I worked for almost a decade, would number from right to left. I'm not sure if there's a significance there or not, but those regions are very similar in area. And then the last map is one that we would present to you as, you know, a possibility for higher ed hubs. And there are some areas there in the center of the state that currently are being shared by colleges from various regions. So, for example, Phillips County, they do some things with what would be Region 2 there, but they also do a lot of things with Region 1. And we haven't made any firm decisions as to how this ought to be put in place. We just want to present this as discussion. We have the same concerns with the 3 counties right in the center of the state, Judith Basin, Fergus, and Petroleum counties. Again, the activities within those schools and the people in those counties tend to migrate to both of those regions for their activities. Our concern is, first of all, that people in a particular area in the state know where their regional portal is, so that they have a first point of contact that they can go to for their activities. We don't even pretend to suggest that every college would be able to take care of all of the activities in that region. And if it wasn't available at that college, obviously that would be a chance for that college then to direct it to the most appropriate college that might have that particular program. So it's not inclusive here. It's not a situation where these lines would be hard and firm. We also realize that there are existing programs where there are articulation agreements within regions that those ought to be honored and looked at. As Regent Pease indicated, we had 6 of the 7 tribal colleges that came in on the 2nd. I convened that meeting, and I thought that was excellent dialogue. And we, again, mentioned that we would like for them to be involved in this whole regional hub concept. And I think for the most part, everybody felt like, yes, they wanted to contribute. They want to come to the table. They want to be a part of this. And so definitely we would need to have their advice and get them involved in any of our discussions here. But this is a concept, a place to start. As was indicated earlier, this is one of those pieces that we've kind of put on the back burner until we got some of these other things taken care of. Quite frankly, juggling the 11 College Now work groups that we have has been very challenging to keep people engaged and to keep this moving forward. And this was one of the areas that we felt we could put on a back burner, but we really do need to be considering it at this point.
Is there anything you want to add?
I think what needs to be, you know, if you're looking at that particular map, what we would say is in Region 1, that we're using the OPI numbers, although it would be good if these various regions could use the same name number or some designation so that it's clear to people how they're in what context they're being used. But because of the Big Sky Pathway efforts that will be going on. Is that my phone?
It sure is. It's just your husband.
Ever since he retired, you know, he'll just call me in the middle of the day and want to chat. It is. We've all concluded that. But in Region 1, you have 4 two-year colleges there. And one of the things that, in talking this over with the Office of Public Instruction, we didn't want high schools to feel that they were assigned. We want them to feel like those are the high schools that are within your region, and it would be logical to pick the one that's right in your community or in your service area in the case of tribal colleges. But that, you know, if you want to reach out to others, then fine. But there's still conversations to be had, and it's very important that the tribal colleges and the community colleges, because they have service areas that have a different requirement. You know, they have a different obligation, I would say, than would be true of the two-year colleges affiliated or with one of the universities in the Montana University system. So, and then a notion of, and I did receive a question about this. I've actually received a number of questions about it from regents, tribal colleges, and community colleges about the competition for dual enrollment opportunities within the same school and the difficult position that puts both of the colleges in. And that's something that I think we're going to need to sort through. Because we're trying to say that we're making opportunities available for students, not one college is better than another, or having the colleges work against one another in a particular format. So there's work to be done there. Any comments or concerns about that broad kind of approach to regions? Guess not. Thank you.
I guess I need to say a couple of things. Well, to somewhat echo what Deputy Commissioner Moe is saying, Madam Chairman, where we have a group of colleges, as in Region 1, I think we need to look forward to some conversations somehow. And the competition has begun. In the course of the development of guidelines, there's outright competition going on. So I don't mean to make it an enormous situation, but the sooner we get to this conversation, probably the better. I think it'll also happen in Region 5. There's, looks to me like 3 colleges there. And while the tribal colleges don't have full-blown programs there, they're on the verge and they're in exploratory conversations. So the sooner we, I think, strike those conversations, the better. And we're talking about small colleges, so that even 8 or 10 FTE is going to mean a lot to any of us. And so it is cards on the table. We really need to talk these, begin that conversation. So, yay, invite us all to the table.
If I could question or elaborate on that, Mary, do you foresee that the Region 1 college presidents and leaders would be developing, would meet and would keep us posted and possibly be developing some kind of cooperative guidelines for themselves in terms of sort of a how they approach, or maybe a template gets developed so that it's just not a free-for-all or a bidding war? I mean, I don't know what you foresee there, but and maybe you can't say. I just think we probably will need each region, if however they get defined, to do something like that.
Yes, the difficulty of having all of the representatives is you're talking about 15, but I don't know, that's a little large for working through those kinds of issues. But it's definitely the next step. My concern about just having the Region 1 people meet and come up with guidelines is, betcha they're going to be different than Region 5, and then we'll be back where we started. So,
work to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments from the board? Regent Barrett.
My only comment would be, I think all the problems have been pointed out are probably, I mean, I'm certain they're real, but I think that should not deter it. We need to move this forward and start acting on it and fix it as we go, rather than, it's too important to wait till we get all these little details worked out. If we make some mistakes, so be it, but let's do something.
Any public comment on this item? Any comment from the campuses? And I guess I'm going to directly ask for comments since we picked on Region 1. President Hicksell or President Cargill, would you like to weigh in on the regional concept at all?
Mr. Chair, Regent Hamilton, of course I would. It's certainly a complicated issue, as Regent Peace was talking about, but I think it's something that we could work together on among the colleges in those regions. It's complex, as David was talking about, because of the economic development things, as well as what Dr. Moe was talking about with some of the things that we're doing with our service region and some of the things that our boards are working on individually. So it's certainly something that merits discussion. Conceptually, I like the regional hub idea because it's important that I not go and do some things that John Seck has been working on, you know, in his neighborhood, so to speak, and that we communicate clearly and openly about what our plans are.
Here comes Jim.
President Cargill.
Mr. Chair, Regent Hamilton, I would agree with that, everything that Stephanie said, basically, that I think that we can work together to make sure that we're serving the needs of our region without being, I mean, we'll keep the competition on the athletic field and not in the academic world. I think that we have worked well together before, and I think we will continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from faculty or students? Seeing none? Or Chancellor Trokey? I need eyes on the back.
Yeah.
Thank you for recognizing me, Madam Chairman. Northern, of course, is very involved with working with 3 tribal colleges, 3 tribal reservations in Hill County. And we have taken a stance, or at least have begun the process of Northern being recognized as one of a non-tribal university, being relegated, or at least have the opportunity to also be included in grants and funds that will help Native Americans come to Northern and be more financially secure coming there. We've also entered into a conversation with the United Associates, which is the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Union in America. And they have a program, a national program with the tribal colleges around the United States, and they're looking at Northern to even further that endeavor by also involving Northern and the 3 tribal colleges that we work with. So we are in the process of doing a variety of things that will help that initiative and help educate Native Americans.
Thank you, Chancellor Trokey. Seeing no other comment on this, Deputy Commissioner Moe, do you want to move on to the next one?
Yes, I do. And in light of the time, I think we'll do the whirlwind kind of approach. So David, help me out if you have in front of you the next steps, I think, on the, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped the, actually, I should be on the progress on strategies and deliverables, yeah. and I'm going to move through this fairly quickly and just see if you have any questions about it. David, would you summarize where we are on the strategies generally?
We have tried to put together the work groups, getting all of them working. The two that we have done the most work with are our ABLE, which stands for Adult Basic Literacy Education, and our Developmental Ed work groups. ABLE, much of ABE is done at the secondary level in Montana, so we have purposely engaged secondary education in our work group there, and have convened that work group a couple different times. We also sent a team to Denver last week, which I headed up the team. Dean Garrick and Dean Seck went with me. We attended a non-traditional No More conference that was put on by Witchy. And it was very interesting to see what various campuses across the nation are calling non-traditional students, and the fact that what we would have said were non-traditional a few years ago, now those are traditional students, and so we must address things in a much different fashion. Much of the activity there was talking about re-engaging students that stop out, and I know that was an earlier discussion this morning, or students that have nearly completed but for whatever reason haven't gotten their certificate, haven't gotten their degree. So we're real interested in looking at those, and I think that that's something that the ABLE work group will continue to push forward. The Developmental Ed work group has done a lot of work. The chairman, Dr. Kleiner, is here, and we have talked to some extent that we're hoping to pattern a conference in Montana after a conference that we'll be attending in 2 weeks that is being put onto the Ed Commissions of the state, and it's called Getting Past Go, which they're using the Tennessee model, and we had some people from Tennessee that came out and actually addressed our developmental ed and ABLE work groups. So those are moving forward at great lengths. Our transitional team has been reported on already. But again, most of our work groups have been very functional. It's been like herding cats in some cases because we have so many of them, and some people cross between more than one work group. So college now is flourishing, and we're moving on with our agenda.
And I'll just wrap by emphasizing a couple of things. The first one is that a major focus of the College Now initiative, and really important, I think, to the future of the state of Montana, is that we are much more successful in engaging adult learners in going to college and degree completion, and that's a hard nut to crack. The item there that's called Pilot Alfie, the Alfie assessment. What's it all about, Alfie? Couldn't help it. Alfie stands for Adult Learner Friendly Institution. And it's kind of a self-assessment that a campus does to see how adult-friendly you really think you are, because, or that in fact you are, because sometimes the difference between your self-image, as I've learned to my great pain, and reality is distinctly different. But I think that it will also be a way of letting us look at different measures that we might take to be more successful in engaging adult students. I frequently run into adult students, and for those of you that were at the Governor's Forum, we had a panel of students that was so powerful. And one of the comments that one of them made, I think two bear repeating. One was the comment of the adult student who graduated from MSU Great Falls, I think in surgical technology, who was saying, when you come back and you're adult, you're scared, you've got this plan in mind, but the whole first month or two that you're there, you're just kind of looking for something to go wrong so you can quit. And that's frightening because so many things can go wrong. But the person who concluded the panel said, you know, what we'd like you to remember is that we are adults. We aren't traditional students. We aren't there for the football game. We are making big sacrifices. And we come here with our hearts on our sleeves. And don't step on them. You know, don't step on our dreams. It was a very powerful way to end it. But we have absolutely got to capture that population, I think, to do something significant in this state. So coming up with what those adult-friendly models will be in the next year is, I think, the most important thing. And I suspect that they will be tied to the virtual community college. The adult usage of online programming is an impressive statistic in itself, not only in Montana but nationwide. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions. This is sort of your to-do list for the next, I think, year.
You're only giving us a year.
You know me.
She meant 3 months.
Any questions from the committee or the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Campuses, faculty, or students? Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Moe.
I did mention it, Madam Chair, and the report in terms of the cards was included in the packet. And I just thank Dan for helping us with that. It was fast and furious there at the end, but it turned out to be really an excellent occasion. And my thanks as well to all the campuses for the help that they provided.
Mr. Chairman, I think as usual I'm behind schedule, so how would you like to handle the last information item?
What kind of time do you think I think we're okay.
I can do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Deputy Commissioner
Oh, don't tempt me. Let's see. It is important that you are aware, and I believe I apprised you of this. Apprised, not appraised, don't you think? Apprised you in July that we are moving forward with a proposal to merge Tech Prep, which is, I think, Title II funds, into the General Perkins allocations. And we have asked for feedback from the campuses and haven't received anything that would indicate a concern. But it is a substantial enough issue that we need to put it out for public hearings. And we will conduct that public hearing on October 6th via MetNet. And just wanted you to be aware of it. Based on the feedback that we get there, my hope is that we would come to you in November with a recommendation to merge those funds. And then I wanted you to be aware that on your behalf, the Commissioner's Office did prepare a report to the legislature on the Perkins State Plan. And it is lengthy and not a page turner, but it summarizes the activities that we've been involved in the past 2 years, and just wanted you to be aware that that has been submitted as was required by statute.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Moe. Any questions from the board? Comments from the public? Campuses, faculty, or students? Seeing none, I'll ask for public comment on items not on the agenda of this committee. Seeing none, that concludes this committee meeting until we reconvene tomorrow. Mr. Chairman.
Do you have one other item?
Oh, do I?
You'd like to do?
Oh, I do.
All right.
As Commissioner Stearns mentioned, this is Deputy Commissioner Moe's last Board of Regents meeting, and I think there are some folks in the room who would like to give her a hug and maybe a nice send-off. And Commissioner, would you like to start things off?
I think we will start by asking Daniel Bingham, who's representing the two-year council, to come forward to the podium.
I think that was why her husband was calling in. We should let him speak.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to say a few words on behalf of the two-year CEOs here in Helena, or I'm sorry, in Helena. They're not all in Helena, in the state of Montana. Helena would like to think that that is Montana, but about 5 years ago, when I arrived in Montana, I attended a Board of Regents meeting in Billings, and I was sitting next to actually what was the Commissioner for Higher Education for the state of Utah, or it was the Commissioner at one time when we were visiting. I knew her from being in Utah very well, and during the course of the meeting, Deputy Commissioner Moe started speaking. She leaned over and says, "That's the singing dean." And then I leaned back and said, Cece Foxley was her name. Cece, what did I get myself into in Montana? I don't have any of those type of talents at all, and I'm not going to even try. But we want to express our appreciation to Deputy Commissioner Moe for all her work. It's been wonderful. She's been in education for a very long time in the state of Montana, and she has touched a lot of lives. In the classroom, in Helena, excuse me.
Don't start.
This is a good thing. In the high schools, in public education, and two-year education across the state of Montana, she has made a huge impact. As was shown in her reports and everything, we just want to say thank you. Thank you for taking care of two-year education and getting us on the map in the state of Montana, and we appreciate all you've done. Thank you.
Before we let you go, the commissioner has a few more words.
And I have another gift.
Jan, you want to jump in then?
I'll jump in.
Okay, good.
And on a more personal note, you may or may not know that way back when we were both English teachers, Mary and I played on rival soccer teams. And she was Columbia Falls and I was Kalispell. And then when I came to OPI, she worked with me on the communication arts curriculum and on the framework for aesthetic literacy. And it's been a long and very rich friendship, and I value as one of my best colleagues. And a few years back, she gave me a book, Good Poems, which I very much appreciate. There's a new revision of that. This is Good Poems once again, and we are at the heart, we're English teachers, and I hope you get back to more poems.
And thank you very much. That was Dr. Jan Kleinert. And Mary also was one of the advisors on the Montana University Writing Assessment beginnings that's helped Jan. Members of the board, on your behalf and members of the university community, I will close with a few words. The first time that I heard Dr. Mary Moe, it was in 1987, and she was Montana's Teacher of the Year. She was teaching in Columbia Falls at the time. And at that time, brilliantly, I thought, the Montana legislature asked the Montana Teacher of the Year to address a joint session. They now have enough joint sessions, they don't do that anymore. But the speaker, they chose the good year to do that, because Mary Moe, as you might imagine, sort of knocked their socks off with her articulate advocacy for public education and for students. What has characterized Mary's career as she moved on into the Helena College of Technology as an instructor and then dean, and then on to the dean of the College of Technology in Great Falls, and then to, I like to think of it, capstone her career as Deputy Commissioner for two-year education. What has always characterized her work is her passion for students. And she would frequently remind us that what is in the lens of her camera when she does everything she does is to think of that student. And she knew a few who, when they drove up to the College of Technology to take a class or to enroll for the first time, they were so frightened that they would throw up first before they could come into the building. That is the kind of student that she particularly identified with and reminded us of, which brought it right to the level of the heart in terms of what we were all about. So as I thought of Mary in these closing comments, number one, I have to say, although we're both English majors, I consider it absolutely something I will treasure that in her last meeting, she turned to me to say, is it a prize or a praise? And I knew the answer. Because although I'm an English major as well, frankly, I don't pass the comma test even very often with Mary, and she'll be missed on many levels for her excellence and her brilliance. So with her passion for students, with a baton to twirl, with always a quip on the tip of her tongue, and finally and always with a song in her heart. We will, in a couple of weeks, in a month, I guess, say farewell to Mary Moe, fabulous Deputy Commissioner for Higher Education. Thank you, Mary. Present from the Board of Regents.
Just kind of quickly. You know, I was one of those students, and Sheila knows the story. I was telling it to my Perkins division the other day, and because apparently I strike people as being prim and proper, people who don't know me very well. But I derailed at the intersection of puberty and geometry, is how I always think of it. I had always been a very good student in grade school, but something when I guess I realized that it really wasn't going to work out, that I was going to, just by sheer force of will, become a male. And at that time, there weren't very many good roles for females, and most of them were taken. So I just kind of went nutty in high school. My parents had to get me out of Billings Central. I narrowly beat the boot. And I slipped into anonymity at Billings Senior and went to college thinking, you know, we went to that forum yesterday where they were talking about the 4 C's, and one of the other panelists there said a comment that sort of captured what I thought would happen to me too, that the 4 C's for me going to college were cut, clarity, carat value. In other words, I just thought, you know what, okay, I'll have a party until I get married. And then the party really began. But I can't believe how fortunate I've been in my career. Always to have had such good support from colleagues, and always to be so conscious of the public good, and certainly to cap off my career by being with you all and having the opportunity to make changes in the state. Couldn't be more rewarding. I have such great respect for the work that you as regents do. So I thank you for that opportunity. And it's very clear it's time to say goodbye. 38 years, my, how the time goes by. That 21-year-old in Baton Rouge, sassing schoolboys for the monks, just turned 60, running short of spunk. And so, my friends, my career ends this way. Can't remember the next line. Oh, around the bend, there'll be a brand new day. I've got a great guy who loves me, a blue sky above me, a twinkle in my eye. So, oh, what the hey, it's time to go and play. It's time to say goodbye.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary. You always leave us with a song that's nice. And a few crying eyes to boot. Lynn's topping the list, as always. We are at a point where we're going to break for lunch, and I don't see it on the schedule, but I think the board is meeting students in the Pentler room, and we're supposed to be there now, so we will do that. I really don't foresee us needing more than the half hour planned in the executive session, so I think we will be back here at 1:30 on schedule, and we will continue at that point. Thank you.